Yeah, so sorry, what were we saying? I lost the track there.
Reincarnation and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you were going into the so an interesting thing within the Greek tradition, specifically within the Saturnian understanding, is right. What kind of separates it from a lot of the other traditions is that there is not this idea of returning. Okay, Kronos or Saturn is that act of creation. He's that violence by castrating his father Uranus and by dividing and separating things into their places. He sets time in motion. And the purpose of this is to create the ever unfolding infinite expanse, right? And the
Yeah.
price of this is violence. So it's kind of like you get to live in the universe and you get to experience life and creation and get to create yourself and get to evolve. But the price of this is you have to suffer and decay, okay, at the hands of the creator. So the creator is also the one who actively destroys you because this is all part of this ongoing cycle of creation and reincarnation, right? So it's kind of like Saturn is seen as a gardener, specifically a gardener of fruit, and you are the fruit. The gardener eats the fruit, consumes the fruit, but with every generation, the fruit improves. It becomes more succulent, more tasty, right? So there's
Yeah.
this idea here within this Greek understanding, at least the Saturnian version of it, of this expansion of creation and this gaining of knowledge across time. Right? Like you can only knowledge can only exist when you look back and when you reflect upon the past. That's again why Saturn is the god of knowledge because he is the predecessor. He's the one who begins everything, right? So when you go back to him, you get to see every other past mistake, every other failure, because ultimately every other generation was consumed by Saturn. And eventually we have to overcome him. This is part of the challenge. This is the game in a sense. Okay. At least how I've understood it. But that you're starting to get into weird mysticism now. Sorry.
I believe in the mysticism and the occult and all that. So what would be the actual like canon story for Kronos? Because as I understood it, like Zeus and freed his brothers and sisters and overthrew him, then like chopped him up and put him in Tartarus, but then later freed him. So what would be the actual canon story from how you all see it?
Well, the problem here, or what we're seeing here, is we're seeing a much later tradition reflect upon, I think, an older tradition, okay? And upon an older tradition that was kind of in conflict with each other, right? So you have two separate versions of the story that are happening simultaneously. You have the chthonic version of events, the events from the side of the Titans, and then you have the Olympian version of events, that from the Olympians. But as history has shown us, the only version that has fully survived to us is that of the victor, right? The Olympian version. Zeus was
Like
ultimately the victor.
Hesiod.
Exactly, right? And so we have that version. What gets interesting with someone like Amon and what a lot of other people have tried to do is they try to go through some of the older texts, like the Orphic hymns, or they try to look at who these agents are talking about and they try to perceive the older version of events through what we have, right? And this is a very difficult task, which is why we need people like Amon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he changed my whole view on Satanism, man. Like I thought of Satan as like the Christian version. I never thought of it as Saturn. That like blew my mind, and it made me
well, this is
kind of
where it
like
gets
hail Satan.
well, the other thing you need to remember too is like, yes, Saturn is this god of violence and he is this scary figure. That is true in the Greco-Roman tradition, but he is also Santa. He is that same character, that mythological character of Santa is Saturn. During the Christmas season, during Saturnalia, which is happening now, the deity was unbound. He was released from Tartarus. And what does
Yeah,
he do? Is he returns us to the golden age. He allows us to reflect and remember the past. And through remembering the past, we can understand how things were and we can realize certain truths about our nature. And the most revealing and important of these truths in the Saturnian tradition is equality. Okay. Things of that money and all of these wealth and all of these gender differences and all of the racial differences, all of this is non-existent in the original golden age when things were how they originally were. This is all impositions that were placed upon us as we grew and evolved, right? So as we learned to control our environment and as we started to subvert and dominate everything around us, we also dominated and subverted ourselves, right? And we have taken ourselves away from the original freedom and the original loving nature of our ancestors. And through this understanding of the golden age, we can return to that primal beginning when we were all equal, you know, when we were all taken care of.
Yeah, I remember reading about the old golden age, and it said that nobody had to worry about food. Everything was given, and the men and women lived with the gods and goddesses of those times, like they was ever present with them. You know what I mean? Nobody had to worry about anything, from what I've read.
Exactly, and, like, there's a lot of allusions here, like, we hear to, like, to the Garden of Eden, and this idea of returning to this primordial time, right?
So
Before
with
there
with
were
the
these
golden,
understandings of violence and such.
Also,
Hmm?
another
with
thing,
the,
another motif you have is the idea of the serpent in the garden, and you also have the motif that's shared with Saturn with the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure you have that, right? And this is also one of the things that's interesting about the Saturnine deity again, right? Like in the Greek tradition, Kronos is meant to be overthrown. This is part of the progress, right? We weren't meant to stay in the age of Saturn. The age of Saturn had to end, right? Saturn is the snake that sets us free from the garden. Even as we go back and we remember and try to remember that peace and equality, it is him that helped us, that eventually cast us out, that forced us to leave, that revealed us that wisdom that prevented us from staying in that primordial state, you know? So it's about this ongoing evolution, but it's also about this reflection upon the past and bringing that knowledge into the future.
So with the Garden of Eden, I was reading into the apples of Hesperides, and it has that dragon around that. Could that like be the same as the Garden of Eden in a way?
I would think so because if you look at so that tree with the that those are the golden apples, right?
Yeah.
It is that the one that's used to spark the Trojan War?
No, that's maybe, but like one those apples was like it was brought to one of the Olympians' weddings, right? And it might have been one of those.
No, that is definitely the ones that sparked the war.
So yeah, so notice this motif. They're connected with romance or with love, and so is the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. So there's actually there's a tradition. I forget how far back this goes. It might just be a medieval one, but at least within I'm going to see if I can find the source for it. But I think it's a rabbinic source where it talks about that the tree of knowledge was most likely a mandrake fruit or a mandrake plant because after Adam and Eve ate of it, they realized that they were naked and they knew each other. So there's this implied aphrodisiac effect to it. But on top of that, like this, very clear mind altering effect. But I think that when you look at the idea of golden apples, that actually interestingly enough, could actually also be supported with the idea of the apples of the Garden of Hesperides, because the mandrake it produces its fruits are actually they look like little golden apples, and I mean, if there's anything that could be called a naturally occurring apple of discord, it would be those. I mean, you throw that. You feed it to a wedding party, you're not going to have a good time.
Right. Oh, just as a funny aside, if you want to laugh, go onto YouTube and search ingesting mandrake root, and you'll see a guy who purposely took a bunch of mandrake to try and trip balls, and he just suffers for like 3 days. He can't pee. It's horrendous.
Another funny thing is when you was talking about the overthrow of Saturn, and then like you mentioned earlier on the chat, like Zeus needs to be overthrown. That reminds me of like Sith in Star Wars so much. It really does.
Well, like, okay, when we get into this idea of the overthrowing of Zeus, okay, like I really ascribe to this idea of this sort of this like this cyclical mystical sort of understanding of history. And Carl Jung is often attributed with it, but you could trace it earlier to people like Avicenna. But I'll use Jung's example just because it's familiar and easy to understand. But when he talks about history, he views it from a Greco-Roman mystical understanding. So he looks, for example, at the fall and rise of German civilization, okay? And he sees it as a mythological process. So it begins in a Dionysian state. It's wild, rabid, it's filled with creative energy and potential, but it's violent and destructive. This is the Visigoths, okay? They get to sack Rome, right? They sack Rome, they conquer the empire and they take it over, but they're still limited and Dionysian. But as time goes on, they evolve and they become Apollonian, right? They start creating high art. They become the Holy Roman Empire. They achieve some of the greatest heights in artistic achievement of Europe, right? But then
Yeah.
again, they start to calcify. They start to age, and the ideology becomes Saturnian or Chronosian, okay? And what ends up happening is now you get Hitler. The worst elements of the society start to reveal itself, and the society starts to consume itself, to actively self implode, because the powers that be will not relinquish power to a newer idea. They won't allow themselves to die for the new to take over. And what ends up happening is they consume themselves in this horrific thing. And there's always a potential at this point for an actual apocalypse, an actual end. And when they talk about apocalypses, this is generally what they're referring to, these potential moments when you get these Saturnian cultural moments, these massive figures like a Hitler, or I think what we're seeing now with someone like a Trump. You're seeing a very similar thing with American society, where American society is now exceeded itself. It had its Apollonian heights where it dominated the entire globe for decades, but now it's starting to bloat and consume itself, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree to disagree. I think Biden's worse than Trump, but that's a personal opinion. But
Mm. I just think, I mean, if you look at Trump and you look at the way that he's behaving and the way that he's
he
talking
is
like a
like a Hitler.
fascist.
I'll
He's
give you that.
talking
He is like a Hitler. I'll give you that.
exactly. And to me, this is too on the nose for this continuous cultural trend, this ever-ending cycle of rising, falling of these capitalism turns into these fascistic things, right? And this is very much a Saturnian thing, and this is a challenge. We need to overthrow and topple these kind of figures, or else they destroy us again and again. And I don't mean it's just Trump. Trump is just a symptom of a corroded society.
So touching on that idea, I think that it's perfectly embodied in just, I mean, like, so obviously there's different, different things that are embodied by both Biden and Trump, but the one thing that they share is that they're both representatives of, shoot, what's the word? Dang it, I'm blanking on the word, but essentially rule by the elderly. And while
Yeah.
there's
The families. The families.
what, no, no, I'm just talking about how like um what wait
Yeah, ruled by the old generation, the older generation that's not willing to relinquish its control to the younger generation, you know, this stagnation.
but
It's
not
not some kind of insidious familial anything.
yeah, part of the insidiousness of it all is that there is no one group or no one, idea
Exactly.
or agenda you can trace it down to. At the core of it, it's something that's innate to humans, but I think on some level, it's not just like a human thing. It's almost like built into reality, like in the same way as like, basically it's something that we need to as a not just as a species, but basically as supposedly intelligent beings in this universe that we have to tackle, and that I think it's kind of like one of those ideas of like the great filter, that it doesn't just exist for us. It's part of the nature of reality, the way that things are. That
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And I would imagine, like what you're getting at is that any other alien culture, at least if they were similar to us, would have to undergo a similar overcoming, you know? Like this is something that we're going to have to get over as a species if we wish to exist into the infinity, you know?
As like a revolution type or as like a movement type?
Well, I think that that's kind of like one of the difficulties is that it's something that it happens in the mind, but it's not enough that it happens in the mind of one person. It has to happen in the mind of enough people. Otherwise, I mean, like, for instance, I think one of the best examples, kind of also of this whole Saturnian idea, and, you know, obviously there's going to be there's people who have all different ideas about why it is, but like, I mean, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and you know, governments and health institutions, along with just essentially the media machine has been able to convince people into thinking that everything's over, and you still have thousands of people dying every month, or actually I think thousands of people dying every week just in America alone, and
100%.
we've just normalized that, and like literally the idea of like we've just normalized the idea that some people that they just some people aren't built for, and like that idea is just so screwed up because on one hand, you I mean, basically here's the way I see it. A lot of the people who were ignoring that there was and that there still is something going around were also convinced that what is it, that this whole idea of that there's like secret societies that are responsible for basically for sacrificing people. And the thing is that that idea, like, why does it have to be within some sort of esoteric, dimension? Like, literally, the capitalistic, and I mean, it's not just capitalism, but like most economic systems that basically pit, money over people. That's a type of human sacrifice, but we just normalize it because we live in that society. And I think that's part of the reason why it might not be so helpful to like view obviously human sacrifice is never good, but like when people are trying to polemicize ancient cultures being like, oh look, they sacrificed humans in the names of the gods, it's like, okay, well, we sacrifice humans in the name of profit, like.
And
Purpose, science,
10,000%, Ariel. Like that was so spot on. Sorry.
they sacrifice us through like wars, profit, like, science experimentation. There's all kinds of stuff that they do to people nowadays to sacrifice them for the goal of science or money or as means of control. In my eyes, like,
Well,
Well, you see this play out in reality. Like, just look at someone like Putin, and Putin has been very explicit about this. And I think we need to take this kind of stuff seriously. Part of the reason the ongoing war in Ukraine is happening is that it's a way for him to kill people. A way for him to kill a lot of the black and brown, poorest of the poor people in Russia. It's just, and he's been very blatant about this, and they're not going to end the war because this is part of an ongoing thing for him. He's trying to radicalize his people so that they'll support him, and he's trying to remove unwanted elements.
it's like it's a really, and I think this is one of the reasons why like the whole idea with Saturn, and like why you have this idea of great prosperity, but you also have this idea of like oppression, because I mean, like, and I think this is also one of the reasons why it's really dangerous to like, while it's useful to use, certain agricultural analogies, it's really dangerous to use them when talking like within political or within, medical context, because I mean, it's one thing if you're talking about, like culling a weak plant because it's infected with something and it's going to hurt the other plants. But then like once you jump to, even, and personally I think that you even have to deal with this on a certain level when you're dealing with animals, that you can't just view it like, oh, because they're like you can't just turn everything into numbers, and you can't just look at everything as the net profit or the like net gain and net loss, because I mean that's not how humans live. And like, I mean, for instance, I think the perfect example is like with the medical system now, how There's people who get, rejected for certain procedures, not because they actually wouldn't be a good fit for it, or because there's something that would make them ineligible, but just because of some sort of you know um, corner cutting, or attempt to save money on the part of the larger system. And I think that kind of goes to this whole idea that the idea of wheat and chaff, like, really, like, there definitely is this idea that certain people are more aware, certain people are, but there's never this idea that, like, someone is better than another person, because there's this one idea that it really sticks with me in Judaism, that just because, so kind of using the analogy of the ladder to heaven, or, like the angels and the kind of like the stairway to heaven, but it's the ladder. But this
Yeah.
idea that just because someone isn't standing on the ladder, um, like, say someone's not standing on the ladder, but they're looking at it and they're thinking about starting to climb it, they're actually at a better place than someone who's on the 612th rung and they're looking down at the person below them and judging them. Because at the end of the day, when you're looking down, you're going down. If you're looking at something that's leading up, you might not be at there right now, but you still have that possibility. And I think that's one of the really just gross things, is that there's this idea that certain people are better than others, and, like, it's just flat out false. I mean, like, I think a perfect example, like, you could look at someone who's supposedly has, well, actually, I don't know if there's eugenicist ideologies that have been put forward about his upbringing, but, like, look at someone like Elon Musk, who a bunch of people are like, oh, he's so smart, he's a genius. Meanwhile, look at all the money that he's lost on Twitter. Like, it shows
Actually,
you.
yeah, neo-Nazi Kanye West was talking about eugenics with Elon Musk, of all people.
But yeah, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, any society that views itself, like, that tries to build itself based off of its strongest, it's kind of like imagine if you were to actually, this is a perfect analogy. Imagine if you were to get rid of every diseased plant in a field of crops. Like, yeah, if there's one that's, like, something's spreading, then you have to take care of that. But if you're just dealing with, like, say, a crop that's not as healthy, for all you know, that biodiversity might be helping another part of the field. So you.
100%. Like, and I get where you're coming from, and you're right. There is a lot of this tendency, at least, especially within the atheistic forms of, like, Satanism, towards this sort of almost cartoonish version of might is right, in a sense, but they kind of remove the more fascistic outward elements. And I think that's a wrong interpretation and a misunderstanding of the whole Saturnian mythos, because while you do have this idea of this gardener who's tending to the fruit, there is also this understanding of the ever expanding, the ever pushing out into infinity, the push towards change and expansion, the understanding that you want an infinite number of experiences. Every experience is valid, and the purpose is the experience in and of itself, no matter how minute or how minor or how great or how grand. That's not for us to decide. The point is the experience itself. It's that which is holy and that which is divine. So we need to expand, and we need to have as many perspectives as possible. And every perspective has its own unique character in which it could bring. And and you see this play out all the time in humanity. Oftentimes, people's adversity winds up becoming their greatest strength. If you look at someone like, what's the British mathematician who had muscular dystrophy? I'm trying to think of it.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking. He even talks about this in his book, and he talks about how he wouldn't his physical limitations led him to pursue math, because that was a place in which he could excel and he could feel not disabled, you know? And
So like
it,
embracing Saturn's dual nature, right? So accepting the bad
exactly,
with the good and overcoming.
exactly. And every single experience is important. There's a lesson, there's something to be learned, there's something to be shared, there's something to be gained. We need to incorporate more perspectives, not limit them. And you don't want to tell people what to do, you don't want to influence them. You want the wide berth. You want new. You want change. This is what's important.
What would be the best resources on to look up the actual like origins of Saturn and the best ways to like, you know what I mean, honor him?
Well, I've been going to, at the advice of Amon, is to the Saturnalia by Microbius. And
Which version do you get? I like the LOEB versions of them, the classics.
yeah, I have mine. Those are the exact ones I have. I have, I think the translation's from 60 something. I'll have to go find it. But it's late
Like
at
the
night and
red
I don't
cover
want to
one.
wake my partner. Yeah, and I have it in the 4 volumes. So, but yeah, that's the one I go to, and you can also go to the allotted to the Orphic hymns, you know, and uh, the big one is theoi.com and Helen. Is it
I'm
Hellenic
always on
Gods?
DUA. I'm always on DUA. And with speaking with about
Exactly.
The Orphic ones, have you all ever heard of the deity Synthoi?
Can you spell that?
It's like CNTHEOI, I think. I read that off that
T
Morford and Langford college book. It's supposed to be before Thales.
before Thingies.
Yeah, I read that in that college classical mythology book with on his Orphic account.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Also, something that you said that kind of it made me think. So this idea was Saturn being the gardener, and well, if we're especially if we're viewing within a syncretic context, that the given it's not this simple, but for the sake of the analogy that Saturn is also being understood as also the god who created the garden. Um, so we tend to view it as a curse that that they ate of the fruit of knowledge, because it says wait, let's see. Well, okay, so so this is this the second one? Okay, Genesis 2. So you have
I think you're getting at something that I've thought about a lot, where the eating of the fruit is a Saturnian action. This is them emulating God and becoming more godlike, gaining knowledge from the tree and then exiting, and it's a level up experience.
yeah. So here, so Vayitzer Adonai. So this is also interesting because here I think it might talk about it in the commentary. Let me see if I can find it. Um, it it has, let's see. Uh, okay, so God shaped the human being. Seeing that the Torah wished to write that God placed man inside the garden, it repeated part of the process by which man was created. Wait, does it show here? No, sorry. What's interesting here is, so it's Vayitzer, but like it could just be Vayitzer, and you wouldn't need two yuds. But and Yahweh formed and well, so here it's the Yahweh Elohim, which I mean that's whole loaded, so I'm just going to say Yahweh Elohim. Formed, and also there's this idea that where you have et, it also is representative of the first and the last, because Aleph and Taf are first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, that it's also representing God within that. So like that God is doing this idea that God's like everywhere. But then there's also like an idea that kind of connects it to the divine feminine, but I don't know off the top of my head. But so and the Lord God, or Yahweh Elohim, created mankind from the dust from the earth, and he took Yafach, I think took or no, he breathed into the afav, into the nostrils, um, breath, the breath of life, and so the human was a living being. Um, Vayita, and Lord God planted a garden in Eden. So it's not the Garden of Eden, a garden in Eden. So this is also why you get this idea that be'eden, in pleasure, or in like in delight. And so it's also this idea that it was like a different type of, you know, existence. But so here, that he planted a garden in Eden, and where it says Mikhedem, um, oh, this is interesting. So it says Mikhedem veyasem sham. So he placed it in the east, but literally in like like the place where like the origin, because the word for origin or source, kedem, it also means like to go forward, kadima. So it means like the source or the origin, which is also, the east is the source of the sun because that's where it rises. So he placed it there. He placed there the human that he formed, and so here you have this idea that God is forming man out of the dust of. Oh wow.
That reminds me of when Prometheus and Zeus formed man out of the ashes of the Titans from their war. That's what that reminds me of a
100%.
lot.
100%.
It's also interesting because before this, in Genesis 1, you have the separation of the heavens and the earth, or the creation slash separation. But so another thing here, though, is I wonder if, well, actually, I'm not picking up on this. I've heard this before, but there's this idea that Adam was actually a golem that was created by God, and so it's like this, almost like this fractal imagery, in the same way that theoretically, if you have the right knowledge, that a man can create a golem out of but in this context, it's not saying that God was a human. It's saying that, like that God created humans in the image. Which I think you could also just view it that God created reality in His image. That it's almost like this idea of like the spiritual world versus the physical world, and God is in the spiritual, and then the physical is just a manifestation of the spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I definitely see that.
with that, so I might get a little bit off topic. With Lilith, and I've heard that she was like half draconian, half reptilian. Where would that like fit in that? Does it? I've never seen the Genesis like that. Does it mention Lilith at all in that?
So Lilith isn't actually mentioned in the Tanakh. The closest thing is they're like night birds called Lilitu, but that just has to do with the fact that Lilith comes from the Semitic root Laila, which means night. Um, but here you do have, and God created humankind in the divine image, created them in the image of God, male and female, blessed them and said to them, but you don't actually have the name Eve until further down. Um, so let's see. The two of them were naked, the human and his wife, yet they felt no shame. Keep going down, keep going down. So it just refers to the man and his wife, or the human and his wife, and his woman. The human said, "The woman you put at my side, she gave of me the tree, and the tree, yeah, the fruit of the tree, and I ate." But you go down here. Um, so let's see. I will put enmity between you and the so you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. So this is referring to the snake and the woman. So this is like humans and snakes. This is the reason why snakes are like, it's an etiology of why snakes are the enemy of mankind. They shall strike at your head, and you shall strike at their heel. And to the woman, God said, "I will greatly expand." So let's see. To the woman, he said, "Harbe arbe, greatly I will expand." So the word harbe, great, is connected to the word expand or increase. Greatly I will increase its bonech, and this word it, its bon is also like connected to, like, I think, like the labors of childbirth. But then the herbonech. Oh no. So herbonech is pregnancy. I think it's been a long time. Yeah, physical conception, pregnancy, conception. The etzev, in yourself. Your So your hard labor and your pregnancies, in hardship shall you bear children. Yet your urge or your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall. So this idea of like ruling over, that happens after he eats of the fruit. That, I don't know, that might have some idea, like some connection with the whole like Saturnian idea of like ruling over. But then to Adam, God said, "Because
Mm.
you did as your wife said and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the ground because of you. By hard labor shall you eat of it all the days of your life." So, like, on one hand, we're supposed to understand that that Adam is basically he's no longer allowed to eat from the fruit of the garden, that he has to, eat from the fruit of his own hands. But isn't that also kind of what God's doing?
100%. 100%. That's exactly what God's doing. I've actually noticed this myself, and yeah, I find this to be a really powerful image. Yeah, definitely a really interesting thing.
Any thoughts, Cathonius?
But yeah, it's this yeah, Saturnian leveling up. It's almost like, and this what's kind of interesting in this, and I think you get some sort of reflective of this in the Jewish tradition, but I feel like oftentimes Saturn is presents himself as a figure to be he's a challenge, he's a figure to be overcome, he presents a problem, he is an antagonist towards us. Ultimately he wants to be defeated, right? But he's still an antagonist, right? And you see this often almost with God, right? Like there's that accusation that God is lying, and I know that a lot of mystical sources will argue with that, but I think that you could make a strong case that God does lie to Adam and Eve about the nature of the tree, you know?
What that means to me with the tree, man, it gives him the knowledge, but like since they was made from him and not fully his essence, does that mean once they ate upon that and they kicked him out of the garden, does that mean that they manifested on earth? Is that when they first came to earth? Was the garden even on earth in a way? Since you said
No,
it was in.
yeah, what I'm getting at more so is that Saturn wants to be overthrown. Okay? That's what's meant to be happened. You are meant to defeat Saturn. That is the ultimate goal. He's coming to destroy us all. We're all going to die in a sense, but that's not the way it has to be. Okay? And there's this constant leveling up that is occurring. And what we're seeing, and when we reflect upon the Garden of Eden and we go back to that Saturnian golden age, is we're seeing a moment of leveling up
So,
when humanity is emulating God and is taking knowledge from God and is now learning to grow and create just like God. They're becoming a gardener, right? And
so
in a sense, we need to continuously do this. And God lies to us. He pushes us because we are meant to overcome him. He
It's
is a
kind of a good
force
point.
of to be challenged.
so
There's a lot of material in alchemical literature that talks about, it's the goal of alchemy isn't actually the transformation of lead into gold, but to sort of create the philosopher's stone, which would perfect your soul so that you would conquer God and defeat heaven.
100%. I've seen them myself. That's where I'm coming at this from, you know?
something though
But
that
that-
Chthonius was saying that I think is really important to touch on is this idea that the Garden of Eden might have not like he so planted a garden in Eden, and there's this idea that Eden might not necessarily have been like a physical place on Earth, that it might have just been the whole Earth, or that like I mean there's so many different interpretations about this, but the fact that that like the act of eating of the fruit is actually what causes a separation. One could argue that like I mean I've like in a really abstract way that like everything that happened before eating of the fruit is almost like it it's happening but it hasn't like there like everything's happening all at once, but then the moment that he's from the tree everything separates and you have like that um essentially the you know the not the monad but
Eating
like
upon the flesh
Are you
of the apple will
suggesting
take
like
on
time
flesh.
in this? Are you suggesting time in a sense begins with the eating of the apple,
well I mean
or a new age, maybe
I
a new because as
so
Saturn as the ion, right?
well, so keep in mind, it's not. It isn't. It doesn't say if when you eat of the tree, you will die or you will become mortal. It literally says when you eat of the tree, you shall surely die. What does surely mean? It means you will be sure that you will die. Is it
So is that
possible?
when it takes on flesh, their spirits or
That's a
souls or
good
whatever
point.
it is?
Yeah,
Well, so there's a few different levels to that. One is that maybe they just didn't know they were going to die before. Like if you think about it, so even animals know that even animals know that death's a thing. Though the question is, do you think that like how much they actually consider like they know that there's such a thing as other animals stopping, not moving around anymore, but like what happens after that? Like, do they really have any concept of death, like anything compared to what we do? And you could argue maybe prior to eating of the fruit we had more of a animal like understanding of death, and just kind of that when we died it was just our time. And then going with the whole like understanding that basically death is just a reunification with the universe, or in some cases even like not God directly, but like essentially like a part of God. But
Yeah.
so with that, there's understanding that the separation might have merely been like a mental one, and so you're separated from the universe in a way that like that the idea of your body ceasing to exist actually gets viewed as death, as opposed to before it would just like everything just is. And
I
so
think
yeah.
I think another really interesting thing to recognize here and to point out is, if you're thinking on a very primal emotional level, is that Adam and Eve are now realizing that God is going to kill them and that God is causing them to suffer, right?
So that they're not going off that just animalistic coding, you know what I mean? That basic
No, but I mean,
DNA.
the thing that they've worshipped and that they loved beyond anything, the thing that provided for them, the one thing that protected them and that they trusted beyond all else, they now know intimately will destroy them and destroy everything that they create, you
Oh,
know?
it's almost like a plant that it gets its nutrients and it gets its water from its nice gardener, but little does it know that it's going to get chopped at the end of its cycle.
Or die in the winter but come
100%,
back in the summer.
Ah, that's
right?
another good analogy. In fact, like so, the whole idea of like I actually experienced this in person. So I took home a graft of was a graft of a grapevine, and I planted it, and I thought it was completely dead. Found out that it wasn't dead. I mean, it died after the fact from the heat. But the point is that like even things that seem dead, like it can still be alive, and it's like. I mean, you even see it with some seeds where it's like it's like how can they continue to be alive even after all these years? But you put them in, in the right container, and you provide the right things, and then it can start sprouting.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So I just thought of something. When you said that like Zeus was meant to be overthrown, like with all that and Kronos, with this might be a little bit off topic, but with us creating AI technology, do you think that would overthrow something like that? Because like Wi-Fi and everything, in a sense, like God, the gods and goddesses, or have whatever you believe, can be everywhere and everything, and then like frequencies and like energy. But AI, in a way, is data flying through the air, and it can be everywhere in a way as it grows. Could that be something that could overthrow the times to bring us into a new age?
Oh, 100%. I think that is a very distinct possibility. I think we're at a very interesting moment because the question that we're currently facing with in terms of AI is, will AI separate from us or will they take us with it? Do we become a symbiotic creature? Are we
With
part of
like
our tools or do our tools leave us behind? And this I'd like to hope that we become symbiotic, but it's hard to say what's going to happen. Probably in a sense both, right? I
The
don't know.
Neuralink with Elon Musk, that chip he wants to have embedded in people's brains that will infuse AI with humans. So it kind of will be symbiotic, but who will maintain control in our
But
minds? And
the question is you always get these ideas. I mean, like people have thought about this endlessly, and I think a really interesting place to look to for Gnostic wisdom and spiritual wisdom is actually science fiction, because I think a lot of science fiction is actually a Saturnian act because you're creating into the future and you're trying to imagine life into the future. Like this
yeah.
is a really important thing. And
So the
when you look at
Kabbalion taught me that everything begins in thought. Like, how could the universe be created? In the Kabbalion, it's from the all, it created from thought. And from thought in our mind is the very birthplace of anything. Art, a child, like when you have sex with a woman, you know what I mean? You think about it, you lust after it, and then therefore from that thought can produce a child. So everything starts at a mental point in creation.
Well,
That's what I learned from the Kabbalion.
but the thing is, the thought isn't actually what's creating it, because there's people who are brain dead, and because it's a bit strange, but actually makes a lot of sense. Like where if what was it, like if someone's in like a devastating car accident and like they're brain dead or whatever, and say they're married and then they were trying to have kids or whatever, that there's a process to go through, like a legal one, where you can like essentially where you get like a court order or whatever where they're able to extract the the seed and basically use that for in vitro, or not in vitro, but artificial insemination. And so the thing is,
Hmm.
in that, does the person who is giving their sperm, do they have any active? If they're brain dead, I mean, this kind of goes down to what is the mind versus the brain versus the soul, and I think it's like at the end of the day, like the idea of like if you think it'll happen or whatever, it's more so like every action starts with a thought, but like I think that it gets a bit different when you're actually talking about conception, because there's so many ways that can happen.
You're right about that. You're right about that. For real.
I was going to say, I'd like to chime in here and say one thing that I think is important to acknowledge is that what's more fundamental than thought is emotion. And it's like basically the mind and the thought is simply a specialized type of feeling that
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Continue.
no, I was going to sit there and say, and that's where I take some issue with the Kabbalion, is it's not thought that's primary, and this is where you have to go back to Neville Goddard and his manifestation. It's that feeling is where the rubber hits the road, and it's the thought needs to get into line with feeling,
I think
and
this
with
is yeah.
intent, and it's basically once everything's lined up, that's when basically the magic happens, for lack of a better term. I'm done
For sure.
ranting. Go on, guys.
I think this is a really good point, actually, but I think we can also look at this from almost a biological perspective, in that we exist predominantly and purposefully as survival machines, right? The entire person, the entire ego is a product of that survival mechanism. Everything we perceive is dependent upon this survival. And if we continue to proceed into the future, we will have to evolve beyond that. But as we currently exist in our current form, everything is predicated upon that, right? So it's not so much the intellect; it is this almost this instinctual, emotional, um, biological foundation.
So if you
In
think
my
about
opinion, what we need to do is to get the intellect and the emotion into sync with each other, because I agree with you about the survival. And I don't know if you've watched. I'm cribbing a lot from Jordan Peterson and his take on Jungian sort of stuff. But basically, the reason that the mind exists and ideas exist is the idea dies so the body doesn't. It's basically you run through these potential real life scenarios in your mind, and you sit there and say, oh, I run off the cliff that way. Oh, I get eaten by the lion that way. And you don't, your idea shows you the mistake, and then your body doesn't suffer the penalty. And that always really resonated very true for me.
so it's kind of interesting, because I think in that, like in that kind of Jungian context, like you can view the different gods, but also like at least the way that I'm kind of formatting it in my head, same with Kabbalah, like how you have um, or even just the idea of like with the seven spheres. So you have, for instance, Saturn, which in a like mental or a conceptual paradigm is basically survival and the struggle for survival against nature and time and you know um,
100%.
and well like most notably death. But then you have what is it, Jupiter, which represents like benevolence and kindness. Mars is like warfare and anger. The the sun, the ability for growth. And then when you get to stuff like Venus, you're dealing with feelings and emotions. When you get to what is it? When you get to Mercury, you're dealing with thoughts and logic. And then when you get to well, and see, this is also the thing, because there's a difference between like the type of feelings and emotions associated with Venus versus those that are like associated with like the mentality of the moon, which is also interestingly enough, why the word lunatic is actually derived from the word for moon, because it has to do with the mentality and the mentality being connected to the moon.
Now, I was wondering, where did you get your correspondences with Jupiter there? Because I don't get anything like compassion out of Jupiter. Jupiter, I get is more just raw power.
So
There's definitely
And,
compassion.
I don't get that from I don't get the compassion coming from Jupiter. I get more the raw power and basically a lack of caring about what happens with the power. Because that's always the feel I always got there is basically the I'm in charge. It's the emperor sort of concept. It's at least I'm just sharing my take on it. And I agree 100% with what Ariel said as far as the archetypes, and that's basically the spiritual realm. You're dealing with archetypes, and that was one of the things I was going to say that I saw in the chat where people were talking about Yahweh and El and all that one of the things that I like to do is look at the basically the portfolio of the deity and watch how that portfolio changes with the name of the deity. It's like you got the more fundamental primal force that then gets sort of differentiated as the generations of deities goes on, more refined. And that's sort of my take on it is I tend to try to look at the portfolio more than I do the actual labels.
I can see where you say raw power because he has wiped out man according to Hesiod at least like 5 times, I think. But he does try to shape us in a way, but those ways have been lost due to time, I feel like,
so
to guide
Well,
us in a way.
my take on that, what you're talking about, the fall there, that goes into the again tower fall sort of thing. It's a matter of things build as much as they can until they become overbalanced. And that part which isn't going to sustain to the future, i.e., with the Yahweh, I will be as I will be, that which was built that can't sustain itself going forward ends up collapsing. And you see the falling away, and the part that's left over, again, the what somebody brought about the analogy about the winter and the rebirth, it's also sort of like a forest fire. You have certain plants that it requires that fire to go through in order for the next generation to sprout. It has to have that smoke and that ash as part of the sprouting process. So
I think what we're getting at, where we're all missing here with Jupiter is, I think Jupiter is very much a multifaceted character, and I think you do get he's very much an emperor energy and all of that, and he's this paternalistic dictator that is definitely there. But with that comes this form of compassion in the sense of I duel it out at my whim and I give it to whom I will, and I see it very much in a it's goodness in a church sense, in a very Catholic, rigid sense. If you follow along this order, it's almost like this very solar energy, And I think it's important that you understand it from a dual perspective because there's a reason why people fall for this energy. There's a safety here. There's a protection here. There's an order and there is a plan. Jupiter comes to you and says, if you give up your free will, if you just follow and do whatever I say at whatever one of my whims, you will be provided for. And most people are provided for, but his whims run wild and he may just fucking rape you.
Yeah.
it's
I
also
was going to say the hierarchy, some of that hierarchy, I feel more picking up from Mars, with that I'll protect you if you fall into line. With Jupiter, it's
He has the
he
power to wipe
tends
out
to,
all of man.
yeah, but he also, like you said, goes around doing his will regardless, and he suffers the consequences for his missteps as well. It's not like he gets away with misstepping, and that's part of what I'm seeing is those missteps are part of what falls away in that tower moment refresh sort of reset time.
it's also
And Jupiter isn't immune to his, to the judgment of nature.
Hera always gets him in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
So I was just gonna say it's almost like one of those like water park buckets where it's constantly filling up with water, but once it gets to a certain point, it dumps over and starts filling up back again. And also I forget who said it, but talking about like the names and how it kind of determines how God is interacted with or whatever. I might be paraphrasing a bit, but what also the connection with the struggle and Saturn. So Jacob was left alone, and a figure wrestled. Ish, a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. So here you have this, this concept that they're wrestling during the night until the break of dawn, until the light comes. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have Sarim, or Sarita, because you have struggled, im Elohim with God, ve'im anashim, and with humans, v'tochal, and have prevailed. Oh, you have wrestled or struggled with the divine and with humans, and therefore, and have prevailed. Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name," but he said, "You must not ask me my name," and he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning "I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved." So here's a few interesting things. During the darkness, not yet till the break of dawn, he asks him his name, and he doesn't respond, saying, "What is it? You must not ask my name." Like that's some really Gnostic stuff. And then he names it Peniel, which is very close to the word for pineal. I mean, like, I tend to think there's probably some connecting thing that, like, either like that the word pineal and that Peniel have a common origin, and that it's not just like showing up that same way. But I don't know.
Oh, there's something going on there.
But yeah, what I was gonna say with Jupiter though is that the concept of benevolence is more so in contrast to Mars. And it, again, is within like a Kabbalistic understanding. So it's this understanding that God is both like Chesed and, or was it Chesed and Rachamim, or like Chesed and Gevura, and so he's like is both mercy and severity, and so it's this idea that them together become compassion, because mercy without severity, or mercy without like restriction, is essentially just you're not helping anyone. You're actually basically causing them to atrophy. And if you are only restrictive and you don't help someone, then you're not actually helping to build them up at all. Whereas if you have structure with with help, then you actually have something that can stand on its own.
No,
It's a good point.
that resonates with me. It's sort of like you're saying that God is doing a carrot and stick routine, and the Bible is basically the record of God saying, "This is going to hurt me, then it's going to hurt you guys." And basically the Israelites saying they're not sure how that could hurt God more than their suffering.
Like, I think it's important too when we understand Jupiter, is like to see him as this paternalistic force towards this kind of righteous order, but a stagnant one, a one that is rooted in just in its own self-worth and its own, and that's it, right? It has nothing to offer us.
Wrecked ego, absolutely agree.
And this is the trap. This is the trap of Jupiter that many people fall for, is that he offers you a safety net, but he provides you with nothing, and he takes everything.
It's a might makes right sort of approach. Mm-hmm. Which again, the next flip is then you need might for right. And that's not really a huge priority of Jupiter. Jupiter's fine with it, but that's not the priority.
So, I just thought of another connection. So, this idea of like heaven and hell, I think you could probably connect it to the idea of like that which rots versus that which is preserved. And so, um, like basically, by drying, by turning goods into dried goods, whether that's meats or fruits or vegetables or whatever, that or even like fungus, mushrooms, you can do that too. That you preserve it by taking the water out of it. Additionally, there's also other ways of preserving, like canning and what is it? Also using oil, but the point is there's this idea of preservation that it's preserved to go from this season, the season which it grew in, which it was alive, that's preserved unto the next. Whereas the opposite of that is that which rots, and everything rots, just like everything dies. But you can slow the process of rotting theoretically. I mean, but even the human and this the thing, humans can't stop it completely. But the idea is that like that God can stop it because all that.
Well,
Yeah.
this is a really interesting question, right? And I think is one that's at the heart of the Saturnian mystery is, can you perpetuate life in perpetuity? Can we use reason to do so? And I think ultimately that if humanity survives long enough, we will prove that true or false.
I think you're hitting on the parts of the whole thing, where life will always survive. A life is going to end. Same thing with humanity.
Well, yeah, but I
Humanity will,
mean, there's a
humanity will,
difference. Sorry, I was just mean
yeah,
like
no,
there's a
and like your body,
yeah, but I
your
mean there's a
cells die,
difference.
but you
Will
continue.
like humanity will end, okay? Like humanity will end, for example, if we manage to conquer death, then humanity will end, because what it means to be human is solely dependent upon our drive for survival. If we conquer the drive to survive, then everything about what we are will be different and we will no longer be human. So in a sense, yeah, humanity will die, but that which we will have leveled up in the same way that Adam and Eve have leveled up. And I feel
Right.
like that's what we're potentially on the cusp of or becoming close to, you know?
Like rising to the ashes
I
again.
was going to say, you hit there, and it's one of those where how much strive to survive is actually going on these days. It's pretty much a lot of chasing your own tail for something better that really isn't.
Well, this is always the
And
constant
maybe,
lesson of Saturn. If you don't strive to survive, Saturn will come and take everything away from you. And this is why we're going through crisis after crisis.
well, people are doing more than surviving. That's why you have the obesity crisis. For the first time, you have more people dying from eating too much food than not having enough food. You know, we're basically we're moving economically into a post scarcity economy in a large part, and we're
Yes and
using
no, though,
old.
because we still have so much incredible poverty at the same time, and you still have people who are starving, right? And because of capitalism. At the same time, you have this gross excess. We have gross want. You know.
I would caution leaping to attributions of causation until you analyze the entire thing as a system, because you're always going to have some people with more money, some people with less money. The question, in my opinion, is just what standard of living are the bottom people having? Because certain standards of living are unacceptable to live in. Other ones, they're perfectly fine. And one of the things, at least, again,
I
I'm going
fundamentally
to.
disagree, though, because at the root of the Saturnian age is the reality of equality. And if equality was achievable in the past, it's achievable into the future, and it just requires us leveling up. It requires us evolving beyond our current limitations. It requires us
I think I
imagining
think
a better world.
I think you're hand waving at words that you don't have well defined. Like, what is equality because I can define multiple different types of equality between people. Just like I can sit there and
Yeah, but I think
develop.
we're just you're just
Please,
starting to
please,
argue. You're just going
please,
in this corner,
please,
Captain.
please! I am autistic. Do not talk, interrupt me, stop and start talking over top of me. That triggers me. I will drop rather than have that happen again. Please do not do that to me, sir.
We're
Can
just
you
having
not
a
do that to me?
We're just
No,
having a
that's not.
conversation.
No, that is not a conversation. That is you attacking me and causing me harm.
I am
I
not.
will not
That
stay
was
here. I will not stay here and be harmed by you. Are you going to
that.
continue to be rude, interrupt me, and harm me? Yes or
That,
no?
sir, that was not my intent, and
Yes
I'm going to leave
or
now.
no? I'm sorry, Ariel.
With all due respect, I really don't feel like he was attacking you. He might have accidentally talked over you, but
He couldn't help himself. He couldn't stop himself. Ariel, I've suffered narcissistic abuse for 3 decades. I've had my whole life destroyed. I cannot accept that treatment, especially somebody who considers that acceptable to treat other people. I'm fine if he's going to. I can't stop him from doing that to other people. I can't be in the presence of that and have him subject me to that. If you can give me advice as to how to handle it a better way, I would thank you because I don't know, Ariel. I'm almost crying here. I don't know how to handle this. I'm asking for advice.
honestly, I don't know. I think that it's just hard for people to hear what you're saying when, like, and I understand the reason why, that does trigger you, but I think that it's hard for people to see that if they don't see, I don't know. It's honestly, I don't know, but
Where I'm at is, I sat there and I came in on dead. I just turned off my mic. I wanted to hear what people. And I don't go around assuming I'm right. I'm the first one to sit there and say I'm wrong. But what I want to know is why I'm wrong. And I'm not even getting out my whole concept before he is interrupting me in a very frenetic manner that Jesus.
with all due respect, I mean, we are having a conversation with 5 different people. We have been talking over each other a bit.
And that's something I just did it to you, Ariel, and I apologize. And that's something that I recognize is partially a function of me being an old fart and not being raised in this. It's acceptable to throw these sorts of punches that hurt me.
What did he actually
And
say?
a lot. What's that?
What did he actually say?
My official degree is economics. I've studied stuff.
Graham, what did
It's
he say?
what he did is I was trying to explain how we need to examine this on a system. He's coming up and saying equality is the problem, and that is it's to me that's a red flag word. Like fair is a red flag word because that can be defined multiple ways, and some of those ways will hurt one group, and they're going to help a different group. And a different definition will flip that. And that's the thing and that's the part when somebody starts going down that route, they're basically trying to, um, belief smuggle, definition smuggle. And I want to know what his definition of equality is. And he's just basically saying, well, it needs to be equality. Shut up and just sign on to my equality.
That's not what he was
Is
saying.
that's the message that's getting delivered to me.
But see,
And
he
I
didn't,
don't.
he didn't bother to ask what he meant. He just assumed, and like, believe me, I understand. I also get triggered sometimes, and I'll just assume. And even when people explain to me what they actually mean, it's like I still have the pattern of what I perceived in my head. That, like honestly, I think that this.
And no, I hear exactly what you're saying, Ariel. This is something my father trained me almost from birth to avoid, because he sat there and said, if two people disagree, you can drill down far enough to where you find out either one of you is factually wrong, or you find a fork in the road where one of you took one principle and one of you took another. The problem is, most people, especially that interrupt like that, they don't want to examine their own system, their own beliefs to a level where they might expose where they're wrong. They're sure they're right, and they're basically trying to convince other people how right they are. And if somebody just questions, not says they're wrong, but questions them, telling them they're wrong, they know how to deal with. That's like a debate. Now they're on the attack. The questioning, the support what you're saying is true, is triggering for these people, I find, because they haven't examined their stuff deep enough. And they really can't support it on that level, so they get like an emotional reaction to being questioned. Sort of like I had that emotional, physical reaction to him talking over me. So I understand how that can happen. I'm just trying to explain to you what I'm observing here.
Yeah, maybe we should just.
I'm gonna turn off my mic and just let you explain to me what's wrong with me.
No, I just think that it's so easy for miscommunications to happen. And, like, this is also, like, kind of going into the whole, I mean, almost like the archonic nature of reality, is that how do you deal with a reality where, like, I mean, it's literally the story of the Tower of Babel, where you can have, everyone speaking the same language, and then all of a sudden, like, because at least sitting from where I sit, because like I didn't see a contradiction with what you two were saying. It's just I think because of how much buzz there is, like for instance with terms like equality, and then terms like I mean like it makes it where just having conversations are so hard because everyone has assumptions of the other side, whether that's true or not. It's just like these preconceived notions, but um, anyway, one thing that I did want to touch on, because this is really interesting. I just found this. So Avodah Zarah, so that's like idol worship, or like literally means worship, like strange worship or strange work. Gemara, Rav Hanan ben Barava says, when are these festivals celebrated? Kalenda is celebrated during the 8 days after the winter solstice, and Saturnalia, and let's see, where does it say Saturnalia? Yeah, Saturna, Saturnura. Oh, this is Satarnura. That's interesting. So it's like Saturn and then Nora. It's connected. They're connecting it to the word light or candle. So Saturnalia is celebrated during the 8 days before the winter solstice, and your mnemonic to remember which festival is that the one that occurs after the solstice is mentioned first in the Mishnah, and the festival that takes place before the solstice is mentioned after, as is the verse, "You have hemmed me in behind and before, and laid your hand upon me." Anyway, here's where it gets interesting. Calenda, from which the English word calendar derives, refers to the first day of the month, and especially to the first day of the year. Saturnalia was a popular Roman holiday on the 17th of December, dedicated to the god Saturn. Cretaceous, which was on the 1st of August, commemorated the day that Augustus conquered Alexandria in Egypt. Note that I should have used the names of these holidays. Wait, where is this? Wait, the anniversary of the accession of the king to the throne is also considered to be a day of celebration, full of idolatrous practices. The final 2 days of idolatrous celebration are personal: one's birthday and the anniversary of the death of a close relative. On these days, non-Jews would make idolatrous celebrations. Interestingly, Jews do not traditionally celebrate birthdays because it was seen to be a non-Jewish custom. So here's where it gets really interesting. Avodah Zarah 8a7. With regards to the dates of these festivals, the sages taught when Adam, the first man, is this Adam Harishon, yeah. Adam, the first man, saw that the day was progressively diminishing as the days became shorter from the autumnal equinox until the winter solstice. He did not know that this is a normal phenomena, and therefore he said, "Woe is me, perhaps because I sinned, the world is becoming dark around me and will ultimately return to the primordial state of chaos and disorder. And this is the death that was sentenced unto me from heaven, as it is written, and to dust you shall return. He arose and spent 8 days in fasting and in prayer. So this is interesting. So the rabbis are connecting Saturnalia with Adam, and like they're connecting almost implicitly the Saturn that Saturnalia is celebrating to, to the God of the Bible, but that they're just implying that it became pagan over time.
Oh, that's really cool. When is this from exactly?
Wait, when or where?
When and where, I guess.
I'll have to look that up, but because the Talmud was composed for a long time. But let's see. Oh wait, I can just look at the reference that I had to.
I was going to say, if that's Babylonian Talmud, that was finalized in the 6/700s AD.
Well, so finalized versus composed, because like you could look at when the biblical canon was finalized, but that doesn't mean that's when the actual sources were derived.
Oh yeah, no. That's what you have to remember about the like the Mishnah and all of those, is those are basically like rulings that happened over time. And of course, you're going to be rewriting the older ones in the newer texts. So yeah, no, totally agree.
So here it says there's let's see, Hanan Bar Rava. So if I look him up, I should find a rough era.
And I was just trying to say that wasn't anything new. That's at least minimum 1,300 years old.
Okay, so let's see. Hanan Bar Rava, or Hanan Bar Abba, was a Talmudic sage in second generation Babylonian Amorah, or from the Amoraim. He lived in Israel, moved to Babylonia with Abba ben Abuya, and died there circa 290 CE.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, one of the things I was picking up when you were talking, Ariel, is it very much sounded like they were using the winter solstice as that inflection point, because you were talking about the 8 days before, the 8 days after, and everything. It was, one was mentioned, the first one was mentioned last, the last one was mentioned first, and that whole inflection point inversion is a standard sort of thing as far as turning of the ages in between religions. You kind of see that as far as like Hinduism becoming inverted into Zoroastrianism, where the devas then become the demons then in the evil guys in Zoroastrianism, where they were the good guys in Hinduism. And turning of the age, the former good guys are now the bad guys. That's what I was picking up from what you were saying.
It's kind of like Marvel and DC Comics, but then they switch.
Yeah, except when you get the tangent universe right in the middle where they combine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so once he saw that the season of Tevet, i.e. the winter solstice, had arrived, and saw that the day was progressively lengthening after the solstice, he said, "Clearly the days become shorter and then longer, and this is the order of the world." Let's see, that word should be Seder HaOlam. Wait. Minchagu. Oh, it's like the custom of the world. Let's see, the order of the world. He went and observed a festival for 8 days. Upon the next year, he observed both these 8 days on which he had fasted on the previous year, and these 8 days of the celebration as days of festivities. He, Adam, established these festivals for the sake of heaven, but they, the Gentiles of later generations, established them for the sake of idol worship. Wow, so they're literally trying to establish this this explanation of why the similarities between Saturnalia and Hanukkah are actually probably a result of, and this is just so interesting.
That's incredible.
And what
Is
pops
there
into
any,
my head, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
No, what I was just quick question that pops into my head is the parallels between that and all the big concern about Judaizing in the early first century Roman Empire, where that was a big concern. And I was curious about how, what you're talking about there, because you're talking a similar time period, and how seems to be a different level there. Just it seems to me like there should be some connection between the two, but that's so far murky for me. You seem to be showing a light into a beast swimming in the deeps there, Ariel. I'm done now. I'll shut up.
What I wonder, what I think could be interesting is there any festival that predates Hanukkah, like that's prior to the Hanukkah? Because the Hanukkah story is rather late in the narrative, and if it's connected to Saturnalia, then there should be evidence of something prior, right? Of a similar festival at that time, you would think.
So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I would guess that probably if there was, maybe it was deemed as too pagan or too maybe not even too anything, but that it basically just got co-opted by, because even like look at the way how people refer to Hanukkah as menorahs. It's technically incorrect. I mean, they're eight branched menorahs, but technically they're not menorahs because a menorah has seven. Well, I guess technically menorah is actually it just means that it's like a lamp. So anyway, basically, so a seven branch menorah versus an eight branch one. The idea, the symbolism of the menorah got co-opted into the Hanukkah. So it might not be that ridiculous to say that there was an earlier tradition that got co-opted into Hanukkah, probably having to do with the Festival of Lights. Because this is actually interesting. This actually might support it because the tradition of the cruise of oil that lasted 8 nights. That was actually, from what I remember, that was invented by the rabbis in order to justify to create a miracle that wasn't contingent on warfare and conquest, because basically they didn't want Jews to be seen as like conquering or warlike, um, especially as they were living in exile in Babylon and in the Roman Empire. And so because of that, they purposefully emphasized the miracle being one that because even though they understood as the victory being provided by God, this was something where there was no context where any part of the miracle was provided by man when it comes to the oil, as opposed to the victory in which you have military commanders and soldiers in the fight.
No, that's a really good point, I think.
So
No, I was going to second there is it's clear that there was a menorah candelabra tradition dating back to pretty much the founding of the Second Temple, unless I'm wrong. And what I wonder there is, was the Hanukkah event writing, that whole thing, a reimagining, revisioning of the original candelabra during the Hasmonean period? And the reason I'm focusing on the Hasmoneans is I watched this podcast that Jacob had about one of I forget the guy's name, but he was basically looking over the archaeological evidence as to when Judaism, basically Second Temple Judaism became a common practice amongst the populace, amongst the common people. And he couldn't find dating for it prior to the Hasmonean period, which, as he explained, the Bible is perfectly consistent with the Bible, because the Bible, is constantly talking about how the populace of Judea isn't following God's word and is going to get punished for it. So as he says, that's the archaeological record isn't inconsistent with the Bible, and that's why I wonder there if that was a rewriting in the Hasmonean period to basically update the old candelabra tradition that had been going from, time of Moses sort of thing. Done ranting. Want to hear you guys' thoughts.
there's actually, I mean, maybe there's definitely some truth to what you're saying, but I'm also hesitant about some other parts of it, just because the Hasmoneans well, but then there's also the rabbis commenting on them after the fact, so it's not that cut and dry. But like there's actually this one. Let me see if I can find that. But in the meantime, do you have any thoughts on what Graham said? Um,
Not directly. I just was thinking that there's an interesting place to look for Saturnalia in the Jewish context. Could be among the the working peoples and the general population, because it's seemingly very evident, at least in the early temple period, that most of the Judaic practices were reserved for an elite, or at least they were generally practiced among the elite, and they did not generally proceed to the general populace. So maybe in some of those pagan golden calf traditions is where you would find some of the remnants of this.
so this is interesting because there's definitely a connection with the like when it comes to the menorah and like its change. So um, one of the thing, let's see, is this okay? Here, let me see this. So the sages interpret. Okay, the Gemara asks if. Wait, hold on. Um, I hate how like if this then that it is because it gets hard to read. Okay. The Gemara asks if it is referring to a case which one forms a figure. Say the last clause of Rav Sheshet's statement: all figures are permitted except for the figure of a dragon. What? That's wild because.
Holy shit.
Wait. Okay. Let's see. No, I have to read up further then. Wait. Let's see. Um. Okay. Uh, with regard to worship, people might worship any item that they find with regard to fashioning figures and then worshiping it. Only with regard to these three items listed in the Mishnah, which are important, do people fashion figures of them and then worship them. With regards to figures of any other entity, people make them merely for ornamental purposes. Interesting one. So, would consolidate these principles of the Baraita pertaining to, let's see, celestial objects, the sun and the moon, and figures of all faces are permitted, except for the human face, and all figures of other items are permitted except for the figure of a dragon. So this is interesting because I wonder if there's this connection between the depiction of the man, or like depiction of the human, and depiction of God. Like,
Well, I have heard references. I remember I didn't read this directly, but I did see a book the other day that was claiming that Yahweh was a dragon.
so yeah, actually, here, let me pull up that reference because that's one of the things that really got me started on this. I brought this reference up to some of my Orthodox friends, and they looked at me like I was crazy. But I mean, looking at this from a linguistic perspective, it's without a doubt. Like, it's either referring to a bull or a dragon.
But I mean, either seem very pagan to me, because Saturn is both worshipped as a bull and a dragon.
Let's see. I'm gonna have to type. Let's see. Sorry, I don't have the Hebrew keyboard stickers on my keyboard, so I'm just having to try and guess if I can remember where the. Oh wait, I feel stupid. There's a virtual one.
Okay, I found the interview. It was one that Derek did with Jotan Adler. He just came out with a book called, let me see what it's called. Is, of course, Derek doesn't name it there. Thanks, Derek.
Is it like the invention of Judaism or something?
No, no, this one is totally scholarly. He dotted everything as far as I could tell.
Oh yeah, no, no, I'm not saying it wasn't, but I feel
Its
like
origins of Judaism and archaeological historical reappraisal.
yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yotan Adler.
Thanks.
So okay, this is really interesting. So Yahweh said to Moses, "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first. And I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall be up there with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of the mountain." So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning he went up to Mount Sinai as Yahweh had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. Yahweh, Vayered Yahweh Ba'anan, the Lord or Yahweh came down in a cloud, and he stood emo with him. He stood there with him. Vayikra, and he decried or proclaimed Bishem Adonai. So he stood there proclaiming the name. Um, so this isn't proclaiming the name Yahweh, but proclaiming in the name of Yahweh, because it's Bishem, not Vayikra Shem Adonai. So here's where it gets interesting. Vaya'avor Adonai, and the Lord, or Yahweh passed over al panav, over his face. It says before him, but passed like literally across his face. Vayikra Adonai and proclaimed, um, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed ve'emet. So this line was it Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed ve'emet. That's said like I think it's 7 times. Also, the emphasis on 7 during the most holy prayers on Yom Kippur. But let's see, Erech Apayim. So this is what I think it was Dragons in Genesis. Is that the channel you found it on?
You talking me?
No, no, talking to Snappy.
Okay.
Oh, found what? Sorry.
Was Dragons in Genesis the channel you found that on?
I don't remember, to be honest. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. But anyway, let's see what they have on commentary here. So commentary. Um, just scroll. Okay. Um, let's see.
I was gonna go ahead, Ariel.
Oh no, no, just say what you want to say first.
Oh, I was gonna do a non sequitur where I've been developing my own take on a lot of the mythology and all, and using a lot of the Jewish what do you call it, pluriform interpretation, where you can read multiple different levels into it.
Oh, like
And
Midrash.
what's that?
Midrash.
The whole part. Yeah, the whole parties. I think of it as a parties interpretation, where you separate your different levels and all of that sort of stuff. But no, one of the levels that I have the whole dragon thing, and this is I touched on that a little bit on with Almond before, is the whole snake bird motif that runs throughout mythology. And I see that as basically that, different levels of awareness ascension. And it's like the base level crawling on the ground. The snake is more of the primal, you do what need to be done. And as you go up there, and again, you're dealing with the whole Eastern Kundalini thing, as you hit there and you hit enlightenment, and then you get your wings. And that's where the snakes going up the caduceus with the wings on top for Hermes comes from. And when you combine those two motifs, you end up with the dragon, the snake with the wings. And what that becomes is that is you have one set of creatures that are more, one set of mentality that's set for basically the survival technique that I believe Snappy was talking about earlier, where you do what needs to be done to survive, and then you also have that high-minded head in the clouds sort of approach that doesn't regard the nuts and bolts of what's required to get stuff done. And the dragons are the ones that have basically a combination of the two mentalities, of the two types of consciousness.
And the wild
And
thing,
this is what's that?
oh, I was just going to say the wild thing is that if you think about it, they both come from, like, birds are descended from reptiles.
Right. And well, so are humans and mammals. And this ties into like the Ian McGilchrist stuff with Master and his emissary, where the two sides, the snake and the bird, are the two sides of the two hemispheres of the brain, and it's the combining the two to become the dragon sort of concept. Is, like I said, this is all stuff that it's work in progress that I'm working on, but I'm seeing a lot of resonance and cross cultural parallels.
I think it's also important to highlight the sexual imagery here between male and female, and the bigendered nature of God and this the divine hermaphrodite, right? And the coming age of the child.
Well, also think about like the. So it's kind of interesting because in some ways it's almost like a role reversal because usually within the context of like Heroes Gamos, especially like when you're dealing with like the progenitor gods, like the Oronic one is the male and then the Chthonic one is the female. But in this case, like the birds are more Oronic and they're more feminine, whereas the serpent is chthonic and is more masculine, and then you have the dragon, which is like the fusion of the two.
No, it's true that it's interesting, right? It's a subversion of the general motif, but at the same time, you see this like there's that deep chthonic connection with serpents that appears across the Aryan cultures for sure, or the Indo-Aryan, I should say. Sorry.
So this is also another thing. So in looking at this reference, one of them comments on this just on the word El. It said El, an attribute describing God as an honest judge, handing out fair judgment. It is an abbreviation of the word El Hayam, introduced as such an attribute in Exodus 22:8, where the Torah decreed that disputes be presented. So El Hayam, like, is that saying the God of the sea? Like that, it's I don't know. That's I'm gonna have to look into that later. But the other thing, so the way that this gets translated though is that erech apayim. So erech is length, or long, and then apayim is nose or nostrils. So that gets translated as nostrils, or like the flaring of the nostrils. It takes long to get to that. So the length of his nostrils, or like the length that it takes him to flare his nostrils, is long, but like it doesn't make sense. It feels so forced. And then it says ve'rav chesed ve'emet. But well, so and he is abundant in kindness and truth, or is it that he has a long face or long nostrils or snout, but he is abounding in mercy and truth. And like I think what it's saying is he's a dragon, but he's a good dragon.
For sure. One interesting thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, Ariel, is I was looking at the word Elohim makes me think of Saturn, just in the idea of the separating into the infinite, right, and the expanding of creation. And you were hinting at this the other day, I think, where you were talking about Elohim maybe not a reference to a multiplicity of gods, but to the act of creating many gods.
So maybe because I mean part of the thing you even see that there's rabbis who are like playing with this idea that like L might be an abbreviation or that short for something. So it's like if that's the case, I think that you could argue that either that it's a reference to El Halim, um, which would be like God of gods, which still would recognize that there's other gods, or at least that whether or not that they're have any power, just saying that they exist. Um, or the alternative is saying that it's a plurality, in which case I think you could even look at it as maybe just a contextualization of like all these different. Well, because it could also just be referring to um, like the concept of divinity, like within multiplicity. So like it kind of like in the same way that the word for water is actually mayim, it's plural, but it's also like how are you going to say there's one water? Like what is
Yeah,
the
no, for
what
sure. It's kind of like referring to the monad in a sense. Yeah.
what is
God in
this
its
what is
many
this?
forms.
Can I have a singular water, please?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
So the, let's see, what was the other thing that oh right, so the, let's see, where is it? So yeah, and all figures of other items are permitted except for the figure of a dragon and a human. The master said, wait, was it Amar Mar? So yeah, the master said, um, figures of all constellations are permitted except for the following celestial objects: the sun and the moon. And so that has to do with their use in like worshiping like Baal and Asherah, or um, which might have actually been even in reference to Yahweh, possibly, but that it was just within like a type of ritual that wasn't condoned. Um, let's see what else. What are we dealing with here? If we say that the reference is to one who forms these figures, if Rav Sheshet is discussing the issue, let's see. You shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for you. This verse is interpreted to mean you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me on. It's literally saying that the like it's not just saying that the celestial bodies are just celestial bodies, because this is before they had that understanding. It's still straight up saying that they're servants of God. So this is understanding them as like gods or angels that are in service to God.
That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely get it. Almost, yeah. There's clear reference to other gods throughout the Old Testament for sure.
I was going to say, well, one of the things that I wonder if L isn't some sort of title, like, president or senator or something like that. And because I've always been with the whole Elohim was referring to more about a heavenly host sort of concept, multiples of them. And again, now we're back to the archetypes, and you're basically, when you're talking Elohim, you're talking about the generic, the generic sets of archetypes, which they give the people name to. And that's one of the things that I definitely pick up in the Hebrew is the difference between a specific name and the concept of name. And it's the concept of name that's dealt with so much, and that's why Yahweh is not speakable and things like that. And it's the idea of there are things that there are concepts that can't be put into words. That they're and that's the whole thing about Yahweh being one of those. And one of the things that I wanted to follow up on Snappy with the whole Aryan dragon thing is it that the Aryans were out to kill the dragons, or and one last nod is the whole dragons being handled different, like the Japanese culture, where they're venerated and worshipped rather than slain. Done with rant.
But I mean, like, I think you could argue that, like, because God commands them to construct the serpent on the pole in a Hushtan. So there was a time in which I think probably they were viewed within a good context originally, but then later they got viewed as like a pest. Maybe even like so. If, one of the things that Almonds talked about is like how vipers and other snakes were milked for their venom, not only for poison purposes, but also as like recreational. And so what if um, what if you have this like paradigm in which snakes get seen as bad in the same way that drugs get seen as bad, not because they are inherently bad, but because they're
People are abusing
medical.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thought, and I've had that thought that maybe, it also. I know the stoned ape theory doesn't get a lot of credence, but I've always you see these kind of things like maybe the serpent is actually a drug that caused the awakening, and that they were ingesting serpent venom.
I don't know why people would reject the stoned ape theory out of hand. I mean, how could that not be part of the mix?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of biologists who take. There's certainly mushrooms are at play, but it's the question of what level, of course, right? And it's just not well
Exactly.
respected. It's just not a I like the idea of it, and I'm certain it's involved. It's just a question of levels, right?
Well, the one that I think is, if you're looking at for humans and all, you got to look at the whole aquatic ape thing as well.
I'm not familiar. Could you elaborate?
Oh, I forget who the lady's name is. It's the idea that humans have very specific adaptations that tend to only be seen in sea mammals.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well,
I've heard reference to this.
the
Okay.
lack of hair, the
Yes.
fat that we accumulate. There's like very specific ones that we share that way. And that's why, again, I'm very much unless I have that solid factual pin, basically a disproof where there's no way it could happen, I'm willing to consider something at least had a role to play, even if it's kind of silly.
I can understand that approach for sure.
Yeah, no, that's why I was wondering.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was asking you about the dragons because I'm curious about the relationship, because you're talking the Semite tradition with the dragons is what we're talking about here. Because one of the things I'm seeing is an aspect of being anti-dragon from the consciousness level that I'm talking about is going to go hand in hand with those people who want to exploit the law for their own benefit. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is if somebody is like a dragon where they can basically see the facts and see above and see below, they're not going to basically be fooled by this is what the law says, you have to believe this is the truth. Even are you going to believe what's written or your own eyes or your lion eyes? And they, being anti-dragon, they want to have people who are just going to believe the law over their own eyes and senses.
Just an interesting side I wanted to bring up about dragons. So I'm mostly familiar with the Indian traditions, and a really interesting reference: the primordial dragon in the Veda is Rudra, which is Shiva, and so yes, while in the earliest tradition, Shiva is considered a very negative force, but this is from the Brahmanical side of things, very limited perspective. And a lot of modern archaeology that's looking into the Vedic period and is looking into these things is trying to get to the more Davidic roots, the Shaivite roots, which has a very different view of these things. So there are these competing traditions here. And it's not necessarily as negative as it appears from the historical record at hand.
Am I wrong? I thought Rudra was an incarnation of Shiva.
So Rudra is the earliest appearance of Shiva in any of the canon. Okay, like there are arguments that some Hindu nationalists make about like some earlier civilizations, but within the Vedas, it's Rudra, and that literally means the howler. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not that was an epithet used because they were afraid to call his name, because to call his name would be to destroy the ritual. But the main concern with the early Vedas is all about the preservation of the Brahmanic ritual to make the sun rise and to sacrifice the horse. And Rudra was seen as trying to stop this at all costs, to prevent the rising of the sun. Again, another very Saturnian kind of take that's happening here. And, so you really, within the earliest Vedas, only see Rudra in this guise as a very demonic, dragon figure. But then within the Upanishads, he is reinterpreted and reimagined as the divine yogi, and destruction becomes almost a whole thing. And then he gets the visual we now see as the divine yogi, or he's depicted as the divine creator hermaphrodite, again another Saturnian image where he is both creating and destroying the universe through his dance and song.
Isn't that also like connected to like the Kumbh Mela and the like the churning of the milk ocean?
100%.
So that's interesting because I was reading this. I wondered like where it's saying figures of all constellations are permitted except for the following celestial objects: the sun and the moon. But what if we extend that like further to where it's not just saying the sun and the moon are celestial objects, but what if it's saying that the dragon is as well? Like, what if it's saying the dragon is the Milky Way? I mean, I don't know. That might be a bit of a stretch, but
It could be interesting. I mean, it would be cool if it worked, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Snappy. I'm trying to correlate what you're saying with my understanding of, Hinduism and history and all that one here. Are you talking about earlier in the sense of this is the earliest written text that we have, or earliest from a cosmological sense? Because what you're explaining here is Rudra is sort of a human, and you're including him with the churning of the ocean, and that was clearly pre-human days. And it's like when I'm dealing with Hindu, the first human that I'm getting is, who was the monkey dude that was Rama's buddy?
Hanuman?
Hanuman.
Well,
Hanuman
all
is
of creation
basically,
begins with it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that Hanuman is like the Hindu version in a very sense, like Hercules is with the Titans, where he's the human, the gods needed to have in order to win the battle they were fighting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm talking about the earliest written text that we have, and the earliest written text we have is called the Rig Veda, and the Rig Veda is a collection of hymns. They're regarded as the received tradition. So the understanding is that
I've read the Rig Veda. I'm familiar with the Vedas and the Upanishads and those. No, it's
okay.
I did. I've done my own take a little bit on some of the Rama, some of the Mahabharata war, some of that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so a lot of that you got to understand is that within India you have these various competing traditions, okay, and you have a lot of different competing literature, and a lot of the modern literature, the most popular stuff, is what was popularized by either the Advaita Vedanta Smartist tradition or was popularized by the Vaishnavite tradition, whereas a lot of the Shaivite tradition was left behind until more recently because it was more in the south. And a lot of these texts also fell out of favor in the north and had to be rediscovered, retranslated, like a lot of Kashmiri Shaivism and such not. Anyway, point I'm getting at. Rudra in the earliest version of the text, this is Shiva, he's the howler, he's a dragon. Then within the Upanishads, there is an evolution of this character of the destroyer where he becomes the celestial yogi figure, okay? And we can clearly see this kind of systemic evolution over time that happens in the Upanishadic tradition because we can look at the dates and how they unfold. And in the earliest ones, Rudra is still very much a demonic, draconic figure, but then he becomes more of this reinterpretation, and you see the yogis reimagining him as a reflection of themselves, as like as the ultimate yogi in a sense.
Now, my take on the earliest version of that you're talking about here, you had Rudra and Indra, and those were the big focus gods, as opposed to the later focus with more of Vishnu, and that was more of a, for lack of a better, chronologically later development. And the earlier ones with more of the Aryan invasion, with more of the Indra and Rudra and those sorts of things. Am I totally off base there, or?
Not completely off base, just slightly. So Vishnu occurs within the earliest parts of the Rig Veda, but he's a minor deity associated with the moon. Okay. And Shaivism continues to this day and is one of the most popular of the mainstream Hindu religions. It's just predominantly located within the South. And because of that, and a lot of racial policies, a lot of that stuff didn't come to America. So a lot of the immigrants who came here were people from northern India, where they were practicing either Advaita Vedanta Smartist tradition, where they view God as an absolute um, unity. In Advaita Vedanta, you can't even say a one. You can only describe God as what it's not. And within that tradition, they elevate several gods to worship in replacement of the ineffable, the Brahman. That which you can't describe, or the neti neti, not this, not that.
And buddy explained a buddy who is Indian explained that to me as basically monotheistic Hinduism.
It's way deeper than that. To call it monotheism, Indians would flip on you, because that was a whole fight and a cultural moment during colonialism.
He was being flippant about it. It was basically a shorthand translation. He was a friend. You've known him for years.
For sure. I mean, there is this purity streak within the Advaita tradition that seeks to, remove a lot of the murtis and get rid of a lot of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, in an essence, it is very similar to our monotheism, for sure.
There's a couple of points that you were saying there I wanted to touch base on. First is
okay. I think it also kind of points out not necessarily just how similar it is to, quote unquote, our monotheism. Like how similar it is just because it's similar to that, but also because our monotheism is similar to that, in the way that our monotheism actually isn't monotheistic. Like, it never was, and even now, when people try to make it, like, the moment you, even if you have your interpretation, the moment you look into the original context, it's just so clear that, there were multiple.
You're bringing this up. I love that you're bringing this up, because I find this one of the most funniest things when you study the Middle Ages, because consistently mystics again and again get killed by the Catholic Church for coming to this conclusion, and it just keeps happening again and again and again.
Well, there is another way around it. There's another way around it. You can sit there and say it's only one God and everything else is a bunch of jinns. That's how Islam manages it.
Well, I think Islam has a very similar concept to us, because they're the ones, which is interesting with Islam, is like Judaism, you have my God is the greatest God. Christianity, you have this Trinity, but with Islam, it gets to the point where God is responsible for every single facet of creation. And everything is dependent upon God. Nothing can exist without God.
Which is where Bishop Berkeley went philosophically later. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could argue that, and I mean, how much we can really know, when this developed, I think some of it's guesswork, but, like, for instance, the idea of monotheism, Judaism and Christianity largely adopted it from Islam, because it's like, Islam was like, look how monotheistic we are. We only worship one God, we're following what the Jews and Christians are supposed to do, but they can't even do. And so as a result, you have mimicry that happens. I think you could probably find a similar case to be made with the acknowledgement of other gods, like, existing or whatever, because, like, the traditional Jewish understanding is that even though there's, like, miracles that happen in other traditions, that God, like the Jewish God, which it's not even like the Jewish God, it's more so that he chose the Jewish people to carry out his message, but that he's just, the God of all the world, which even that is a development from the original idea that he was a tribal God. But what I think is interesting here is the idea that, where was I going with this? What was I just saying?
You were getting at just that
the tribal aspect of it versus the monotheistic aspect of it, I believe, Ariel.
Oh, right. So, like, this idea that, that our God, aka the God, is the only God, and all the other gods are, just idols, or, like, they're, I mean, I think there's definitely forms of Judaism that acknowledge, like, essentially the idols to be
So you see a very similar thing play out within the Middle Ages in India. So between the Vaishnavite and Shaivite traditions, there is this tendency to incorporate the pantheon of the other tradition, but as lesser figures or to make them subservient. So Graham, you brought up Hanuman. So Hanuman within the Mahabharata is actually understood as an incarnation of Shiva. And then he is the ultimate servant and worshiper of Vishnu within, oh, sorry, this is in the Ramayana. I said Mahabharata, excuse me, Ramayana. So within the Ramayana, Hanuman is the ultimate worshiper of God, right? Of Vishnu. And he makes Shiva subservient as his ultimate thing. And then you see a very similar thing within the Tantrikas and the Shiva Lokas, where Krishna winds up going to Shiva for advice on how to talk to Arjun. So it's like these ridiculous competitions, where they're acknowledging the other side and incorporating them into their own mythology.
Well, part of it is that's why you have to have the Trimurti, which is basically like the Hindu version of the Trinity.
Well, you get that within, that's a smartest Advaita thing that only really exists within that Advaita Vedanta monist school, though.
Well, what I was going to say, two points that I had that I didn't get either of them out. First one is I very much question anything that's come out of the Raj period and how much of Indian history got destroyed / perverted during the British Raj. And everything you're saying here, I don't know. I accept you believe it and all that one. I don't know how much of what you're saying is true to the traditional one or is the perverted one that came out of the British colonialism. You understand what I'm saying? It's not that I distrust you. It's I know how awful that was and how mangled things were coming out of that. So,
this is where it gets really complicated, though, with the Indian tradition in general. If you're talking about a text like the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, there are no official canonicalized versions. There are traditional versions that are passed down within various religious schools, and that are and then you get in the modern
there's also no way to say when they were originally written either, since they were originally written on bamboo leaves, which had no way of surviving. And my second point was when it comes to Shiva is there's from everything that I've studied, there's two different types of Shivaism. One of them is like a very dualistic Shivaism, and one is a very non-dual Shivaism.
Yeah, so you get the Tantra Loka tradition or the Kashmiri Shaivism tradition, which is rooted in monism, but it comes at it in a very different philosophical direction than Advaita Vedanta. And then you have, it's called Shaiva Siddhanta, which is very much a dualistic a system where the goal is to become in like it's to become like a heavenly angel worshiping at the feet of Shiva for all eternity.
No, I was going to say, out of all of them, one of the ones that always resonated with me was, the Dattatreya, and I think that's the Nans.
Yeah, the Naths. So you're talking about, so these are the non-dual Tantra Loka traditions of Kashmir. And the problem when we're dealing with a lot of this is a lot of it has been sensationalized in the West because of a couple of really dubious figures, cult leaders like Yogi Bhajan and a couple others who brought Kundalini yoga as well as a few other techniques, some of the sexual techniques and stuff from this tradition to the West, but they removed it from the context, and they kind of bastardized it.
I'm leery of pretty much most of the people coming over. It's sort of like Yogananda. He's 100% legit.
For sure.
I always felt really, really awful for Krishnamurti and just how the Theosophists just destroyed his life.
There's such a horrible organization, my God.
And it's one of those, his story and how he basically told them to go fuck themselves. I'm not your goddamn world teacher. that was my hat's off to him. That was such an incredible thing he did.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not your word leader, buddy. I'm not your buddy, guy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Sorry.
just so fucked up. But like the Theosophical Society, like for example, they played such an instrumental role in saving a lot of these Hindu texts. Like during the British Raj, like you were saying, no one was saving this stuff, no one was writing it down. A lot of it was on very fragile materials, and the Theosophical Society bought up a lot of it en masse and translated it. In fact, Gandhi himself did not read the Mahabharata until it was given to him by the Theosophical Society,
I
and
did
that
not
was
know that.
yeah, and it was not widely available in India until it was published in English by the Theosophical Society.
And see, I think this is one of the reasons why we need to appreciate the good that. See, I think this is why it's maybe like, I mean, it's tricky because I like after researching this, seeing the connection between like the Nazi Party and even some elements of like the cult of personality that's present in like modern communist nations, that like both elements of that, like fascism and then also, well, I mean, both cults of personality, but I don't want to create a false equivalency
Well,
here. They both have
you
issues, but different ones. At the end of the day, I think what's interesting is that they were both heavily influenced by theosophy, especially like the idea of you know that sometimes there needs to be great violence or great sacrifice in order to bring about a better world. And that idea, kind of like what we were talking about before at the beginning, that idea is like it's okay when you're talking about stuff that isn't human and you're well. But see, that's also dangerous because what if you say stuff that isn't human, but then you're able to redefine what human is, and that's exactly what the Nazis try to do. And so,
right,
like,
Bring this full circle, though, Ariel. That's the essence of the Bible. Yeah, Abraham, his willingness to sacrifice Isaac. That willingness to sacrifice is, I'm just saying that those parallels are there. And you're with the willingness to sacrifice humans.
mm.
it's 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 like it's interesting because I think that if you just read the Bible without context, you read it alone, and within the context of the modern world, yeah, it seems cruel. It seems so effed up. Like, why would anyone view this as their moral authority? But then when you look at it, I mean, given I think there's still issues about talking about it within objective lenses, like, oh, the Bible is the holy. Like, what do you mean is the like? Who's not to say that there won't be something just as holy in the future? Like, I think that's claiming that you know better than God to make those
Hmm.
claims. But really, shoot, what was it? Something that was um, oh yes, human sacrifice. So you have this idea that human sacrifice was rampant, which this was even something that we're going to get into maybe is what actually did human sacrifice in the ancient world entail. And the thing is, like, yeah, you definitely had instances of like actual live human sacrifice, but in a lot of cases it seems like it was actually just like veiled references to sexual rights in which you have non-procreative intercourse, or not even necessarily intercourse, but basically because there's seed that's wasted, and this is back in a world that still viewed, sperm as essentially like mini humans that just needed, the proper vessel in which to grow. That's basically
Homunculus theory, yeah.
yeah. And so it's just so wild because you actually I think I covered this with Neil a while back, that there's actually a part in the Talmud where it talks about the reason that the flood was brought on was essentially because of masturbation. And it's not merely
Hmm.
saying that people were being naughty because they were pleasuring themselves. It has nothing to do with the pleasure. It has everything to do with the belief that they were killing people, killing people that were yet born. But the thing is that, now with modern science, we know that regardless of whether, you fertilize someone with your sperm or not, the sperm's going to die regardless. So it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Theosophy for a second because I thought that was a really interesting point. Like, yeah, I did say that they were a horrific organization, and I do think there was a lot of horror they did, but they were incredibly important. and they did do a lot of really interesting things. Like, they were a catalyst for the British suffragette movements and a lot of women's rights issues around the entire globe, and they did bring a lot of this information to light in a really important way. It's important that we look at all this stuff in the context in which it arises, and that we call the bad bad and we call the good good.
Yeah.
I would say they more popularized the suffragette movement. They were around before the Theosophists, unless you're dating Theosophists before Blavatsky.
No, I just mean that they were a key player in the suffragette movement, and that many of the
Yeah.
key suffragettes were Theosophists, and that Theosophy was very clearly a feminist movement with a woman leader, at a time when that was unheard of. And they did a lot of good in promoting that. And you can still find a lot of these suffragette theosophical manuals that were sold and to young working women to try and help them become emancipated. And that's a really important touchstone in cultural history, I think.
Oh no, I agree with that one. It was more of I saw them as coming lately to, basically
of course,
coming.
they're not the
coming
originators.
late. Yeah.
They were just a major part of helping that, popularize that and give it a face,
Yeah, no, I have a lot of issues with the Theosophists. It's like Steiner, I have, Rudolf Steiner, I have a lot more respect for. And part of that is because of just how he split with the Theosophists when he had his issues. And I'll always wonder what Germany would have been like if they had gone more the Rudolf Steiner anthroposophy route as opposed to the Dietrich Eckert Nazi route.
Yeah, it could have been interesting. I mean, the thing with Theosophy, I think, is just to me, it's read their literature. Have you ever tried to read the Book of Dizon? It's the most incoherent drivel I've ever subjected myself to. It's terrible. It makes the Book of Mormon look like Shakespeare.
Oh, Joseph Smith was trying very hard to have the Book of Mormon look like Shakespeare. That was intentional.
It's just the Book of Mormon is so painful to read. It's so painful to read. But the Book of Dizon, it's painful and just beyond dumb.
I was gonna say there's a couple of them I have. It's like I have an Ops that I think is pretty good. The Orantia Bible is another one that's not too awful as far as those channeled sort of BS stuff. Much better than the Dizon, I agree.
Well, you know about your anxious connections to like shoot, I forget what it like they believe some really messed up stuff as well.
Oh, they were part of that whole New Thought spiritualist, that whole movement. Yeah.
Like you were getting at a lot of the current cults of personality, and I trace that more to the New Thought, at least in the way that it's happened in America. In Russia, it's a little bit different, and it does come more from Theosophy. But like Trump has clear connections to New Thought. His father was a member of a New Thought church, donated millions of dollars, and just the way that Trump talks, and it's very clear. He's trying to shape reality with his will. Like it's an ongoing thing with him.
Well, I wouldn't object to so much if he wasn't such an odious and disgusting human being with I don't want reality looking like Trump.
No, for sure you don't. But it's just wild to see it in real time with these speeches where he just throws things at the wall to just try and attract as many people as possible. He's just babbling, and
No. You are mistaking it. You need to. Have you ever read the book Covert Hypnosis?
No, this is what I mean. I 100%. Like that's what he's. It's supposed
it's
to
an
appear
actual
that way.
science. It's an
exactly. I just mean like he's using these New Thought techniques brazenly.
What it is, and that's what I was talking about with the whole dragon thing. Is the listen to my words, believe those words, don't believe your eyes. And now you're talking about it's mesmerizing people, and that's what I was going to say. Is you need to look at the root of all this new thought stuff is back with actual mesmerism before it
Yeah,
was
that's
considered
true.
before it was
You're right. It
considered
does come from
hypnosis.
Mesmer, and it does come from a lot of
Mesmer
Masonic
was u-
Egyptian.
Mesmer was using techniques that people don't use these days because everybody said, "Oh, those were fake. This you need to use hypnosis instead." But he was using magnets and stuff. And again, there's a whole lot of ways science got shaped back in the 17 and 1800s that people today don't realize just what got sealed off from exploration.
No, for sure, definitely. Right. Scientism is its own ideology with its own, you know, uh, certain kind of
That's what
pursuits.
That's what's so disappointing with what Derek's doing with Miss Vision is it seems like he's trying to create the religion of academia
I mean,
where
I
you
find that there
need
is sorry, go
you
ahead.
need to have your certificate for anybody to believe you. And this is like the law. They're pointing to the piece of paper and saying because of this piece of paper, everything this person says basically should be believed. And they're becoming like the priests, where the people themselves they can't understand this material. They can't just read these books. They have to believe the experts.
Mhm.
And that's again another what you're talking about with Trump. This is another way to shape reality where you're only giving people these options.
Oh,
And
100%.
that
It's just
we
I mean, in Derek's defense to a certain degree, right? It's we live in a dishonest world, right? Where there's all of these people who are trying to manipulate things for their own personal greed and their own personal will and their own personal ideology. And I don't think it's the best. I don't like it's a method. It's an attempt to try
it
and
is.
to have
It is.
good information, and I commend him for trying. And I love his channel. Right? I mean, you can only try.
Oh, you can be honest.
Yeah.
And that's to me, I have three hurdles that I require people in order to be, basically what I consider acceptable as part of my inner life. Other people I have to interact with because they're part of the world. And that's decency, honesty, and integrity. And one of the things I found is that I only run into problems with people who stumble on one of those three hurdles. And most of the people in the general populace stumble on all three. On Ariel, you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that, by the way. But so, I found something really interesting in this. So, um, hmm, sorry, one second. Let me just finish chewing. Okay, so let's see. So, what one thing is, let's see, where is it? Um, so yeah, it says, if in the case of one who finds vessels and upon them is a figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea. And one thing that's interesting about that, it doesn't say the sea, it says the Dead Sea, literally a place where no life can, well, I mean, some life, but like no, no real life can live. And so, um, the other thing though is it says, wait, where's the thing? There's one where it talks about you're not allowed to make one in the figure of a dragon, but you're able to do it in like in the face of a human or something. So it seems like the issue is if you do the full human but not a human face. But the other thing was, here's where it gets interesting. As it is taught in a Baraita that Rabbi Yehuda adds to the list of forbidden figures even a figure of a nursing woman and Sar Apis or Sar Apis. The figure of a nursing woman is worshipped as it symbolizes Eve, who nurses the entire world. The figure of Sar Apis is worshipped as it symbolizes Joseph, who ruled over Sar and appeased Mephis, the entire world, by distributing food during the 7 years of famine. So that's interesting. He's a ruler. Joseph is a ruler. He's really powerful, especially during 7 years, and he's connected with the grain harvest. There's definitely some some Saturnian imagery with Joseph.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a dying rising thing, even the Sar Apis, like
That's
yeah,
that's what jumped out at me was Serapis,
Oh,
yeah,
and
dude, I didn't
right.
even see it.
and Serapis was the
Sorry, what? You there?
Oh, we may have lost him.
Well, in the meantime, while we wait for him to get back, how did I not see that?
Serapis.
Maybe read it in Hebrew. Let's see. Where's this? Let's see.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Mateus. Let's see. So this is huge, Mateus. We found. Well, technically it was Graham that found it. I just glanced right over it. I found a reference to Serapis in the Talmud. Let's see. Where is this? Oh,
I'm back. I got dropped.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Ariel? I wanted to see you were all excited about the connection with Serapis.
Yeah. So look, whoa, this is huge because here it says even if so this word Sar, to rule over Sar, that's spelled with a shin. So the fact that this is spelled with a samech is proof that they were trying to create a folk etymology for Sar, basically trying to make Serapis Sarapis. Wow. Holy crap, dude. Kudos to you.
That's amazing. Dude, you could write a paper on this. You could get published with this.
Let's see. So what's this? So okay. So he ruled over and appeased the entire world by distributing food during the 7 years of famine. But the figure of Serapis is forbidden only when it is holding a dry measure and measuring with it. I wonder what. It's like why is that the issue? And the figure of a nursing woman is forbidden only when she is holding a child and nursing it. The sages taught.
Because that's Babylon, man.
Oh yeah.
It's Babylon. Nursing the child? That's the Sotera.
And that was the other one that I thought was the dragon would be a reference with Babylon, with Marduk and his pet dragon.
Oh wait, what was it? Like Umumu or what was it?
Yeah, something like that. That sounds right.
Let's see. The sages taught what is a figure of a dragon. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar explained it is any figure that has scales between its joints. Rabbi Asi motioned with his hands to depict scales between the joints of the neck. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Chanina, said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Let's see. So Elazar said any figure that has scales between its joints. Interesting. So they're basically saying that anything with scales in between its joints is a dragon.
So then is a snake a dragon?
Well, see, that's the thing. Maybe they're saying.
Because does a snake have joints?
Here's another better question: is a Nakash a dragon?
So that's tricky because the word Nachash is like literally the word for snake, but it's also the word for serpent. So it's like it's all contextual. So there's like the serpent with wings versus the serpent that crawls on its belly. Also, another thing. So the seraph is also. I mean, think about it. It's a snake with wings. It's like, but it's not just a dragon. Obviously, it is a dragon because it's a snake with wings, but it's literally a snake with multiple wings. Like, so it's like it's a bird. It's a snake bird.
Yeah.
Well, didn't it have like 4 wings? I want to say
6.
6. That's right.
2 to cover its face, 2 to cover its feet, and 2 to fly with.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep. No. No.
a
As soon
snake
as you
bird
said
just kind
six, I
of
remembered.
a snake bird just goes back to what Graham was saying before.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's why I find that whole snake and what Ariel was saying is snakes that go on the ground, snakes that fly. And now I don't know if you guys listen to Tabor. He's doing his new translation of Genesis, and it's talking about it very literally. Flying things that fly, and it's very. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I've been
I'll have to
following
take
him.
that
He's very
out.
similar.
I do like Jeff.
Who?
Jeffrey Tabor.
Isn't
It's
it
James
James?
Tabor, but yeah,
Oh, sorry, James. Sorry,
yeah.
my bad. Smoking
No
too much.
worries.
Sorry, what?
How much is too much?
When you start mixing up common names.
Okay, so, oh wow, this is interesting. So, we learned in a Mishnah there, Rabban Gamliel had diagrams of the different figures of moons drawn on a tablet that hung on the wall of his attic, which he would show to the ordinary people, who came to testify about sighting the new moon, but who were unable to adequately describe what they had seen. And he would say to them, "Did you see an image like this, or did you see an image like that?" The Gemara asks, "And is it permitted to form these figures? But isn't it written, 'You shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold'?" Which is interpreted to mean, "You shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me," i.e., those celestial bodies that were created to serve God, including the sun and the moon. In answering, Abaye said the Torah prohibited only the figures of those attendants that one can possibly reproduce something like. Wait, hold on. Okay, wait, here. Is this the part that was. Okay, yeah, here. As it is taught in a Baraita, a person may not construct a house in the exact image of the sanctuary, nor a portico in the exact image of the entrance hall of the sanctuary, nor a courtyard corresponding to the temple courtyard, nor a table corresponding to the table in the temple, nor a candelabrum corresponding to the candelabrum in the temple. So that's the reason why the menorah that's used for Hanukkah doesn't have 7. But one may fashion a candelabrum of 5 or of 6 or of 8 lamps, and one may not fashion a candelabrum of 7 lamps, even if he constructs it from other kinds of metal rather than gold. As in extenuating circumstances, the candelabrum in the temple may be fashioned from other metals. So this is where it gets really interesting. The Baraita continues. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says one may not fashion a candelabrum of wood either, in the manner that the kings of the Hasmonean monarchy fashioned it. When they first purified the temple, they had to fashion the candelabrum out of wood, as no other material was available. Since a wooden candelabrum is fit for the temple, it is prohibited to fashion one of this kind for oneself. So what's interesting with this is that the menorah is literally supposed to represent the tree of life. So it's actually
Yeah, it's an Asherah.
yeah, and so this was seen as like bad though. Like the Hasmoneans were kind of like poo-pooed on for doing that. But let's see. Yeah, so
That's
The
wild.
other thing that jumps into my mind there, Ariel, is if the menorah used in the Hanukkah event was wooden, how do we know that what was burning was oil?
what do you mean?
Well, it kept burning for 8 days. How do we know that it was burning oil all of those days and wasn't burning some of the wood that the menorah was made out of?
That is a good point.
Because they're talking about later, it got changed to metal. Just a thought occurs to me. It's where I don't rule out possibilities.
But yeah, I tend to think that probably, I mean, maybe, but you think they would have also had to like fireproof it for what? I mean, I'm not really sure, but
I'm not sure either. It was just like I said, just random thoughts, random connections that pop into my head. Just for saying it, not trying to say it's true or anything. Just interesting thought.
but yeah, let's see.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So let's see. This so the thing that we were talking about before with the Saturnalia. This is an etymological story of the origins of Calenda and Saturnalia. Some scholars also point to the story as the origin of why we light candles on Hanukkah. Holidays around the winter solstice. Um, oh, so just so you know, this is someone's commentary on the above text. This isn't from it. Holidays around the winter solstice are often associated with fire as a way of noting the beginning of the days getting longer, or to at least bring light to the darkest days of the year. In the northern hemisphere, there is also a sense here of cultural expropriation. Your holidays were originally our holiday. Your holiday are belong to us now, in a sense, and you corrupted them. Well, there, it's funny because Islam does the same thing to to Christian and Jewish traditions, and like at the end of the day, I don't think that makes them like I don't think that is equivalent to stealing, but I also think that it's kind of, and I mean I say this as like I also have these opinions about when it comes to Jewish traditions doing this. It's kind of like the gall to be like, oh well, your ideas are actually based off of ours, and then like as a result we're right and you're wrong. Like why can't both be right? But
Right?
yeah,
It's interesting though. I mean, this is kind of a fairly common cultural phenomenon.
but yeah, and
I
so
was going to say, I'm an old fogey. I don't understand this whole cultural appropriation thing. And the other problem is I'm Irish. So we always like a good party. If you got a holiday to celebrate, hey, let's celebrate yours too. For us, let's paint a green stripe down the middle of the road, paint our, drop some green into our beer and get drunk. Have a good time. It's all good.
What what I think of cultural appropriation, there is a line. I always think of like that movie Nightmare Before Christmas. That's a perfect example of cultural appropriation gone awry. But most of the time, you can have hybridity, and that creates, the best cultural ideas, that expands
And,
us ever forward.
and to me, National Lampoon Christmas is sort of like that is its own new culture it's creating. God help
Hmm.
it.
it's kind of funny because like if you think about it, like you know, like I mean, imagine if Jesus would have been alive like today, like he would have thought what was going on in the temple in terms of the money changing. It'd be like, oh, that's nothing compared to today. It's like, if you think about it, like the God of the, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't even say it's the West. It's the God of the world now, in not that different than what Jesus was saying is Mammon, is like the desire of money, and like at the end of the day, it's so weird how, and I think like stuff like that is what's convinced me that there's something more going on, and like what I mean more going on, I mean that like it's not just we don't just live in a purely structuralist like materialist world, that there's
Hmm.
something going on spiritually, because like how it is that people from all these different traditions can be getting to the same thing, and then all in all those traditions, those beliefs or those theories tend to be persecuted, and then on the other hand you have this shoot, where was the other, oh yeah, basically how like there's something that like it just it has like like a supernatural grasp on people. And I mean, I think you actually could argue that money is in some ways supernatural. Like I mean, it's money isn't inherent to nature.
Oh, definitely.
No, you're definitely, money is supernatural. Money is, to quote my money in banking class, money is a collective fiction.
Mhm.
And my take on your thought on Jesus, if Jesus came back, I think what he would say is, never should have thrown them out of the temple because they took over the fucking world. I should have just left them in the goddamn temple where they just were limited in the harm they could do.
Yeah, it's also like the thing that I find really interesting is like if if Christianity had actually been like, and I when I say Christianity, I mean like the type of Christianity that was really going around conquering all other. I mean, so basically Roman Christianity. If it had truly been about bringing people to Jesus, then they wouldn't have purposefully. I mean, because I mean, it's actually it's genius, because if Jesus can't come until all the Jews believe in him, and then they purposefully write Jesus or like depict him as a way that no Jew would ever believe that he is the Messiah, because of just like the way that I mean, so I mean, it's more complicated than that, because like there's also this idea that there's like messiahs of generation. So like you can have a messiah, but that they're not the messiah. But like beyond that, just the idea that Was it like how it's written, like, the Jews or the Pharisees, when in reality you're dealing with the people who were running the temple, and it's kind of like, today you have, right now you have a Democrat in the White House, and before him you had a Republican. But like to say that the Republicans or the Democrats are like running everything, it's like it's so reductionist because really it's lobbyists.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting thing to look down, just because, like, with all of these kind of, you know, these traditions, when we're going back to this kind of thing, what am I trying to get at here? Uh, Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, almost here.
Oh shoot.
But
Same here. No, I was gonna say just stand in the middle of the tracks. That train will run you over sooner or later.
Yeah, but don't worry, you'll have been right all along. You'll just
Yeah.
be run down.
no, but you're right in the they're seemingly, like, with what's happening with Roman Catholicism. It's like, I don't know if there's a direct hand involved, but at the same time, a lot of this stuff just seemingly works so well. Like what you see within Roman Catholicism is this merging of pagan universalism and Jewish nationalism into, like, this such an effective force of control that it's dominated the world to this very day in some places. It's crazy.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say part of the point of the Roman version of Catholicism, if the people won't come to Jesus, we will take
And so much of
Jesus to those people.
our modern society now is trying to break free of the backwards norms that were inflicted upon us by these systems of control.
Now, one of the things I was going to say, Ariel, is there seems to me that from my reading of it, is there was one set of Christianity prior to Constantine, prior to a lot of, actually prior to Irenaeus and the whole heresy movement, and that was more dedicated to truth, sort of thing, and that was one that got subverted. So that's sort of my take. Is there was one that got subverted in the early second century,
I tend
the
to
Orthodoxy.
I tend to think there were probably multiple Christianities, like that. I mean, like you have 12 apostles. If they go in 12 different directions, you have already 12 different, essentially, religions. Because, like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, and it's a game of telephone. But the other thing that I was going to say is that there's something very well. So a few things, but there's like something very Saturnian about. I mean, for better and for worse, about the Catholic Church. And one thing that I find really interesting is, so do you know where? I mean, I'm sure you guys do. Like, this is something I learned relatively. I mean, what was it? Maybe about a year ago. But like, so obviously the term the Vatican comes from the Vatican Hill. But do you know what the Vatican Hill is in reference to?
The Saturnalia, isn't it the original, the Capitoline Hill? The original.
Capitoline's a different hill.
Okay, sorry.
The seven hills in Rome.
Yeah, I just, yeah.
I forget exactly. I know that the Vatican isn't a lot of it based off of the whole Flavian complex and stuff.
So, I think it goes previous. Let's see. When does this go to?
I can let me pull it up on here because I'm half remembering. Again, it's as Snappy said, it's almost 3 in the morning here.
So, given this is from Wikipedia, but there's sources. I'm going to look into the sources after the fact. But in ancient Roman religion, Vagitanus or Vaticanus was one of a number of childbirth deities who influenced or guided some aspect of parturition. In this instance, the newborn's crying. The name is related to the Latin noun vagitus, crying, squalling, or wailing, particularly by a baby or an animal, and the verb vagio or vagire, vagitanus, has thus been described as the god who presided over the beginning of human speech. But a distinction should be made between the first cry and the first instance of articulate speech, in regard to which Fabulinius, Fari to speak, Fabula was the deity to invoke. Vegetanus has been connected to a remark by Pliny that only a human being is thrown naked onto the naked earth on his day of birth for immediate wails, Vegetus, and weeping. And something that I do kind of wonder, I mean, and maybe this is just, like my potty brain thinking, but is there a connection here between, two sexual organs, possibly? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, it's also
The
interesting.
deity itself makes me think of the Logos.
It's also very like barbaric, because I think that Vegetanos is like also like I think they might be like bigender. I'm not 100% sure.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, we should probably end off soon. But
Yeah.
let me just read a little bit more. So let's see, where is this? Okay, here. Let's see, where is it? Okay. The sages taught on the day that Adam, the first man, was created, when the sun set upon him, he said, "Woe is me, as because I sinned, the world is becoming dark around me, and the world." Oh wait, did I Oh no, I didn't read. The world is becoming dark around me, and the world will return to the primordial state of chaos and disorder. And this is the death that was sentenced upon me from heaven. He spent all night fasting and crying, and Eve was crying opposite him. Once dawn broke, he said, "Evidently the sun sets and the night arrives, and this is the order of the world." He arose and sacrificed a bull whose horns preceded its hoofs in the order that they were created. Okay, that's interesting. As it is stated, and it shall please the Lord better than a bullock that has horns and hooves. Um, let's see. Poor Adam, always afraid of the dark. The story seems to explain a curious verse from Psalms. Why would the verse say a bull that has horns and hooves? Don't most bulls have them? Is there any reason to know the bull has these features? The Midrash reads this as a bull whose horns were created before its hooves. Now, that's interesting, because the horns grow, but the hooves it's born with. Now there can only have been one such bull in all of history, the first bull. And who else could have sacrificed the first bull but Adam? So Adam must be saying this verse, and why would Adam offer thanksgiving? Because the sun went away and came back again. It's actually quite a remarkable piece of exegetical thinking.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
And now I'm immediately hugely grokking on the whole Mithras stuff.
Oh
The
yeah.
bull sacrifice there, and that's definitely connected. I also found another one with the Vatican Hill that is just it's hitting thing, and that's the Vatican Hill was basically developed by the Judo Claudians, and then taken over by the Flavians, because it was Agrippina the Elder who drained most of the swampy areas there, and then it developed with the royal villas and stuff. So.
Wait, did you say Judeo-Claudian?
Yeah, I meant Julio Claudian, but yeah, there's reason to think there's some part of what I'm exploring is that it appears to me that the Caesars had some Jewish roots.
Yeah, that's the reason why I thought you might have said that. But
It was a total Freudian slip, but it's one that I don't back away from.
Okay, and Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says the bull that the first that Adam the first Adam the first man sacrificed had one horn in its forehead, as it is stated, and it shall please the Lord better than a bullock that has horns, makreen, and hooves. The Gemara raises a difficulty. Isn't makreen plural, which indicates two horns? Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says mikeren is written, i.e. the letter yod is missing from the word, indicating that there was only one horn. Here is the origin of the Jewish version of the unicorn. There was once a unicorn in the world, but alas. Okay, I'm sorry. No, that's stupid, because it could easily be referencing an auroch. I'm sorry. No, he didn't kill the last auroch. That's just saying that the first one that he killed, or the first one he sacrificed, was
No, he killed the one and only unicorn.
Damn. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why we're cursed. It's not because of eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. It's because he killed the unicorn.
Here we've been blaming Noah all along.
Well, and actually, that goes to something else. So there's this. Because you were bringing up. What was it? The. I forget exact. Okay. So there's this one reference in, I think it's Job, um, or okay, Aharon and a calf. Interest. Okay, so the bull of heaven. Um, or nah, we could always cover that another time. But there was one last thing that was, shoot, where was it? Oh, right. I wanted to see what I could find on this. Let's see, is there anything else? Okay, let's see. These are, oh wait, these are all referencing the Vatican fragments. Um, the other thing that I was going to say, so I found some really interesting references to like astrology when I was looking for references to Saturn in Jewish tradition, and this is honestly just so cool. So let's see. Okay, so let's see, where is it? Um, shoot. Okay, here. The fourth statement, the statement about the Sabbath, corresponds to the sphere of Saturn. The astrologers tell us that each one of the moving stars has a certain day in the week in which its power is manifest. The star is the dominant power the first hour of that day. The same is true concerning the star, which is the dominant power in the first hour of the night. They say that Saturn and Mars are harmful stars. Hence, harm befalls anyone who begins any work or sets out on a journey when one or the other dominates. The sages therefore said that permission was given for harming. Let's see, what's it? 293 interprets to me on Wednesday night and on the eve of the Sabbath. Now we do not find these two quote unquote demons ruling night and day back to back on any other day of the week except for Saturday. It is therefore unfit for one to occupy himself on Saturday with everyday matters. On the contrary, one should devote himself on this day to the fear of God. So, like, I don't know, that really struck me as interesting, but then it actually goes into talking about the different influences that they each have. Um, let's see, where was it? Okay, here. Okay. Let's see. He who is born. Okay, go out and tell the son of Levi, not the constellation of the day, but that of the hour is the determining influence. He who. So this is from the tractate Shabbat. So this is from the Talmud. He who is born under the constellation of the sun will be a distinguished, bright, and handsome man. He will eat and drink of his own, and his secrets will lie uncovered. If a thief, he will have no success. He who is born under Venus will be wealthy and unchaste, or promiscuous. What is the reason? Because fire was created therein. He who is born under Mercury will be of a retentive memory and wise. What is the reason? Because Mercury is the sun's scribe. He who is born under the moon will be a man to suffer evil, building and demolishing and building, eating and drinking that which is not his, and his secrets will remain hidden. If a thief, he will be successful. He who is born under Saturn will be a man whose plans will be frustrated. Others say all nefarious designs against him will be frustrated. He who is born under Tzedek, Jupiter, will be a righteous or right-doing man. Sadiq, Rabbi Nachman ben Isaac observed, he who is born under Mars will be a shedder of blood. Rabbi Ashi observed, either a surgeon, a thief, a slaughterer, or a moil, a performer of ritual circumcision. Rabbah said, I was born under Mars. Abaye retorted, you too inflict punishment and kill. It was stated, Rab Chanina, the planetary influence gives wisdom, the planetary influence gives wealth, and Israel stands under planetary influence. Yesh Mazal Yisrael. Rabbi Jonathan maintained Israel is immune from planetary influence in Mazal Yisrael. Oh, okay, this is huge. And then I think this is a good place to leave off. It was also taught, and they agree, that one may mix the shatit, roasted barley to which honey is added, on Shabbat and drink Egyptian beer. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking too much about the Kikion, but there might be some connection there. I'm not
Oh, I think so. That's interesting.
No, definitely, especially when you have all sorts of fungal effects that can come in there, and the Egyptians knew a lot about how to combine fungal effects with honey and all. They were the experts on bees.
Oh yeah, and so like even the honey could have been possibly laced with something else just from the like for instance there's a was it rhododendron honey like the mad honey or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to say there's some that you die if you eat it, be based off of some of the plants that the bees harvest off of.
There's also a sacred honey that's in Israel. I think it's on from Mount Hebron. Trying to remember. Hermon or something, yeah.
Interesting. That's some fallen angel honey. Okay, so this is interesting. It says, and drink Egyptian beer, as it is not considered to be for medicinal purposes. The Gemara says, didn't you say one may not need? That contradicts the statement that they agree that it is not permitted to stir the shatit. The Gemara answers that this is not difficult, as there is distinction between the cases. This dispute with regard to shatit is referred to mixing a thick mixture, which is similar to kneading. However, that statement where they agree that mixing is permitted is referring to a soft, thin mixture that can not be kneaded, and all of these statements are referring to a case where one alters the way he kneads or stirs. Oh, holy! This is it. This is it. This is it. The Gemara asks, how does one alter the manner in which he performs these actions? Rav Yosef says, on a weekday, one first places the vinegar in a vessel. So here you have barley, um, what was this? Egyptian beer,
You're adding an acid here. Yep.
barley, roasted barley, honey,
Honey.
um, and then now you have vinegar in a vessel, and then places the shatit. On Shabbat, one first places the shatit and then places the vinegar. The Gemara relates that Levi, son of Rav Huna bar Chia, found the one who kneads in his parents' home kneading bran on Shabbat and feeding it to his ox. He kicked him so that he would stop. When his father came and found him, he said to him, "This is what your mother's father said in the name of Rav." The Gemara interjects, and one who is his mother's father? It is Rabbi Yirmeiah bar Abba, who said, one may knead but not feed animals, and a calf that does not take the food with its tongue may be fed on Shabbat, and this applies only when one alters the manner in which he does so. Let's see, is there anything more about this? Let's see. In the name of Rabbi, one moves the ladle or stirrer. Isn't it that the case will not mix well? It means that one pours it into another vessel. Okay, so they're talking about like a process. So it seems like in this, it's talking about something that you're not supposed to do. But I'm definitely going to look more into this shatit because this is.
Yeah,
Oh
wine,
wow, wow.
honey, vinegar.
Hold
It's
on.
like you're not supposed to do it unless you invert it, and that whole inversion thing that we were talking about
So
earlier. Go on, Ariel.
I want you all to look at this because this is so like honestly, I like the muse is speaking to me, dudes. Like
Amazing.
so that word um shatit, the root for that is shatat. And so at first I'm like, okay, that means drink because the word shoteh means to drink. Um but there's also another one. Let's see, where is this? Um this is honestly this is striking me. And I think that this supports my theory about Magdalene or yeah, about Magdala. Let's see. Okay, shata. Oh wait, it would be here. Shatat. Um, so shatat could be to center a point, but that's. Oh wait, no, sorry, I'm thinking with a tet. I think. Wait. Oh, so I should have been further up. Sorry, I'm starting to get kind of tired too. Okay, here. So shatat. No, shachat. Shatach. Wait, shitim. Here. It should be further up. Okay. So Shita, acacia.
Oh, that's that's the money right there.
Yeah.
DMT time.
Holy crap. And so
Wow.
so actually, that might be the same. Let's see. Uh, Shatit. Hashatit. So here it says. Okay, this is interesting. Barley porridge made of barley meal and honey, which was formed from uh, shechtita through elision of the but like wow, I think there's definitely something here because like you saw before how they're connecting sar spelled with a samach to sar spelled with a sin, even though there is no connection. So like, and especially because this is written in Aramaic, it's very possible that they started switching the way that they spelled it. But so here you have
The other angle, Ariel, the other angle that needs to be explored is what exactly is Egyptian beer, because that may have a special recipe as well.
Oh, good point. Good point. So, the other thing that I was going to look up here. So now that we looked up that, so there's shatat. So to means to be set or appointed. In which case, it actually has a similar context as. Huh. That's interesting. Let's see. Um, so that was. So if I look for shata with a hey. So here's where it's from. So, huh? It should be Shotet. I'm like, hmm. Yeah, it should be here, but oh wait, it is here. Drinking, shtia, feast or banquet. So shatit. It's coming from shatat, or it should have the root up here. Shata, shata to drink from shatu, in Assyrian and shatia in Ethiopic. Um, but yeah, so shatiti, shatit. So the shatit is that which is drunk, but like most Hebrew words, there's a double meaning to it. And maybe the best place to leave off here. I'm just going to look this up real quick. So the shatit. And what I was saying before, that shatat is from a similar, or has a similar meaning as asher, or as shoot. Like I said, I'm kind of blanking, but okay. So this was shatit. Um, wait, it should be here unless I'm misspelling it again. Um, oh, maybe it's. Oh, here. Wait, shtia, shtika. Huh. Weird. Well, there'll be something else to look up another time, but let me see if I can find anything more on this. No, okay. When is let's see. Warp and woof does not mix well. Okay. Is this the next thing? It might be. Oh, well, actually, let me just look up this. Okay, here. Okay, so this is 156.8. They place the vinegar and then the shatit. Okay, this is this okay. Wait, yeah, here. So this says a person who creates a mixture of so sifting is one of the categories of forbidden labor. Therefore, we may not sift straw in a sieve or place a sieve with straw in a high place so that the chaff will fall. Also, here you have more of this Saturnian imagery. Since this is like sifting, one may, however, place straw in a sieve and carry it to an animal's feeding trough, even though the trough, the chaff falls while one is transferring it, since this is not one's intent. A person who creates a mixture of small particles in water is liable for performing a derivative of the forbidden labor of kneading. Therefore, one may not make. Wait, where's the part of the shatit? therefore one may not make a mixture of a large amount of roasted flour, lest one comes to need unroasted flour. So here you have unroasted flour. What one may, however, mix small amounts of roasted flour a little at a time. In contrast, shatit, i.e., grain that has. Okay, so here it's saying shatit is grain that has not matured to a third of its fullness. That sounds like it might have some connection to like the fungus, right?
Yeah, because that could mean, yeah, if maybe the reason why it didn't grow to its fullness is because it was infected.
And it sounds like a malting sort of process where you let it sprout and then you basically roast it.
Wow. This is just like it's like there's so many of these hidden gems that so many people just they don't have the right, they don't have the right eyes to look at this.
Because what exactly does a grain that has not matured to a third of its fullness? That sounds like a sprouted grain, no?
Yeah.
No, it
And
does.
that's one of the big things in like Whole Foods these days is the health benefits of that just sprouted grains.
Okay, this is so wait that's like wait is it sorghum you're talking about?
Well, all of them, like just it's you just is as the seed sprouts, it activates a lot of
Enzymes?
chemicals that exactly that is not normally present in either seed form or later on. And that's why it's a big thing in like Whole Foods and a lot of ingredients. It's the sprouted grain movement.
So I think isn't that or
And I was just saying in malt, the traditional one, like for
yeah, malt. So
Scotch, and all of those, it's a sprouted grain that you then roast.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
was thinking of. I thought you said malting before. I was like, which I mean, it still sounded right, but I wasn't thinking malting. But yeah,
No, no, I was talking like malt. Yeah, the yeah, like for Scotch and
yeah, I was thinking of
chocolate malt. Yeah.
I was thinking of the grain molting, like like it molts off or whatever. But so it's interesting though. So it says, that is not matured to a third of its fullness and is roasted and coarsely ground. Okay, so here it's saying one may, however, mix small amounts of roasted flour a little at a time. In contrast, shatit, which is the grain that has not matured to a third of its fullness and is roasted and coarsely ground, which resembles sand. Large quantities of it may be mixed with vinegar and the like at once, provided the mixture is soft. If it is firm, it is forbidden. Is it forbidden or is it not proper for use? Like that's something that I'm wondering. But for it appears as
Where it
the
appeared.
for
What does
What
that mean?
exactly? What exactly is the grain being used? Is it wheat? Is it millet?
Maybe there's some kind of fermentation that's happening when you let the grain harden too, if it sits out for too long.
oh okay
Well,
this is
how long is it in the vinegar? Because if you're applying it in the if it's sitting in the acid for a while, that's going to have some chemical effect.
So there's another thing that's interesting in the context of it saying that you're not able to do it in certain contexts. So before this, it says a person may not cause himself to vomit food on the Sabbath. When does this apply? When he uses a drug, for he may come to crush herbs. It is, however, permitted to place one's hand down one's throat so that one will vomit. It is forbidden to press the stomach of an infant so that he will defecate, lest one give him curative herbs. It is permitted to place a cup over an infant's navel to lift it up. It is permitted to place a neck brace or hip girdle around a child. Similarly, one may lift up the tendons of a child's ears, whether by hand or an instrument, and lift up cartilage on one's chest. For all these activities are performed by hand and not with herbs. Since the person is in pain and there is no suspicion that one may crush herbs, these activities are permitted. Sifting is one of the categories of forbidden labor, though. Therefore, we may not sift straw in a sieve, or place a sieve with straw in a high place so that the chaff will fall. Since this is like sifting, one may, however, place straw. Oh, okay, that's what we were talking about before. But what's interesting with this is it's relating this preparation almost like with a curative, in which case, like, I mean, there's definitely something there. But it talks about it. You take a large amount of it, but that it's roasted and coarsely ground, resembling sand. Why would you do that? To increase surface area so that it's more easily extractable. And it says large quantities of it may be mixed with vinegar and the like at once, provided that the mixture is soft. if it's too thick, you're not going to be able to really. Basically, it's telling you don't mix, don't or you have to use a certain amount of vinegar. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a dough, and then you can't knead it. And so you're able to prepare it if you're not mixing it it's like doing it in such a way that's. I wonder if there's also like a context in which preparing it
Here's
beforehand.
here's here's my interpretation. You need to add the vinegar, and you need to basically soak the grain. And you need to keep adding vinegar in order to keep the grain moist, because if you don't keep adding the vinegar, it's going to basically dry out and firm up, at which point it is ruined. This is my take on what the recipe is doing.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of you need to add enough vinegar to basically, you know, soak it enough. It's that because that's how I do my groats in the morning. I'm on the basically the Saint Germain sort of diet groats, and and you soak the steel cut oats and other grains in like I soak them in milk, and just it absorbs a lot of that one, and that's what I'm interpreting that is what it's saying here. Part of the question is what exactly grain are you working off of? The other one that you had earlier that triggered something in me, it seemed to be saying that you can't force yourself to throw up on the Sabbath, and it sounds like you're actually consuming drugs on the Sabbath as well. There seemed to be a possible implication that I was extracting. Don't know if that's what they were trying to say or not. I'm done ranting.
Oh, no worries. So I think it's actually saying you're not supposed to take drugs on the Sabbath, which is um, which I mean, there's later rabbinical interpretations that if you need to for your own health, then like you're not supposed. So it's like more so within the context of like some like a drug that you take for fun or for.
Recreational, yeah.
But it's also kind of funny because, well, what about wine? And not only that, but wine was drugged oftentimes in the ancient world.
Hmm.
But yeah,
But yeah, I'm gonna head out, guys. It's
oh,
getting late.
oh yeah, definitely. Just before we do here, let me just finish this last part. So
Sure.
it says, although bran does not produce a mixture resembling a dough, it is forbidden to be mixed with water, lest one mix earth and the like. One may pour water over bran and stir it with a spoon in all directions. One may not mix it with one's hands, so that it will appear that one is kneading. If one does not mix well, one may pour it from one container to another. Um, and then yeah, I think that's basically it. But I'm definitely going to look more into the shatit because like the fact that it shares a connection with like it's shita as well as like shata, which is something that you drink. I mean, there's something there, especially because like I think I've mentioned this before, but P.D. Newman, he's actually friends with one of my former, well, not former, but like well, former and also future professors that having next semester, who he's a Freemason, but he's friends with P.D. Newman, who's done research into this theoretic, and by theoretic, it's not like theoretic, like he's just pulling this out of his ass. This is like basically reconstructing a recipe based off of like kind of similar to looking at things before the meanings got lost, but a mixture of acacia, was it acacia, honey, vinegar, and I forget what else, but basically that it's able to extract DMT from acacia, and but yeah, there is definitely something here because the Masons got it from the Templars, and the Templars got it from the Holy Land, and the thing is, if it was in the Holy Land, but it's it got lost somewhere. I mean, maybe that's one of the things that are in the Vatican archive. Who knows?
I
I
would
wouldn't
not
be
be
surprised.
surprised there. Yeah. I was gonna sit there and say the other echoes I'm hearing here is like the Eucharist, because you have a drink and you have a substance that you're eating as well. And just throwing out random thoughts that I'm exhausted at 3:15 in the morning here. I think you're onto something, and I think you need to know what the grain is, what the Egyptian beer, what exactly they mean by Egyptian beer, and I think you're definitely onto something with the trace through the Templars
Awesome.
and all that one. And I just wanted to say, Snappy, I apologize for being as awful as I was. I hate being like that, and I'm sorry that happened.
I apologize for over talking you. It was not my intention to upset you or I'm just passionate, and I sometimes I just speak too much. Honestly, it was,
No, I get that, and as I explained to Ariel, I'm 60, and I was socialized in an entirely different environment, and a lot of what is normal in today's interaction is just stuff that I just I it doesn't mesh well with me, and I need to figure out how to deal with that. So
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, and no disrespect meant.
no, no, none here either. It was one of those literally, I was in pain. And that was a just trying to get the pain to stop. And I can only apologize after the fact when it happens. I hate getting, and that's why I was saying is I was going to drop because I can't be in that environment. And I'm glad we were able to get past it, Snappy. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well,
All right.
this was a lot of fun, and I mean, probably won't be going this long, but ideally going to be doing this maybe not every night, but like a few of the nights during Hanukkah. Obviously, this was the start of Saturnalia, but yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, lots of fun.
yeah.
What time do you expect to start, Ariel? Just so I can kind of pencil you in.
Honestly, I don't really know because I'm very
Okay.
like spur of the or not spur of the moment, but also like play it by ear. But I mean, probably around the same time, maybe a bit earlier than we started today. I just had to run some errands and then I took a shower when I got back, so that's why it took me so long. But anyway,
Oh, it's all good. I stagger my schedule, so I just was curious. So roughly the same time. That's all good.
all
It's
right,
enough for me.
cool. Well, have a good night or good morning, I guess, everyone. Take care.
All right.
Yeah, no,
Take
thanks a
care.
lot. It was a lot of fun, and I think we uncovered a lot of stuff. It was good, Ariel. Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Io Saturnalia.
All right.
Yo, Saturnalia.